In the dead of night, a priceless celestial globe vanishes from a locked case in the Royal Observatory, its gems gleaming with secrets older than the stars themselves. Who could breach an impregnable vault? Why does the scent of lavender linger where the thief stood? And what cosmic truth, hidden in a forgotten constellation, drives a shadowy cult to kill for it? Join Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson as they unravel a web of coded ledgers, ancient star maps, and a noble woman's deadly ambition racing against a celestial deadline that could reshape humanity's place in the universe. Chapter 1. The Vanishing at Greenwich. The fog hung low over Greenwich, a spectral shroud that clung to the cobbled paths and obscured the spires of the Royal Observatory. It was a chilly October morning in 1895, and Sherlock Holmes, clad in his familiar Inverness cape, stood motionless at the edge of the observatory's courtyard, his keen eyes scanning the damp stonework. Beside him, Dr. John Watson shivered, pulling his coat tighter against the biting air, his breath forming fleeting clouds in the mist. The summons had come urgently, delivered by a breathless courier at Baker Street just before dawn. And now the two men found themselves at the heart of a peculiar mystery. "Holmes," Watson began, his voice low, "you've been staring at that wall for a good 10 minutes. Care to share what's so fascinating about it?" Holmes' lips twitched into the faintest of smiles, though his gaze remained fixed. "Patience, Watson. The stones are speaking, if one knows how to listen. Observe the irregularity in the mortar fresh, yet deliberately smeared to appear aged. A clumsy attempt at concealment." Watson squinted at the wall, seeing nothing but weathered stone and patchy mortar. Concealment of what, exactly? Holmes did not answer immediately. Instead, he crouched, his long fingers tracing the base of the wall where it met the dew-slicked grass. "A point of entry," he murmured, almost to himself. "Not through the door, not through the window, but here beneath our feet." The mystery had begun hours earlier, when Professor Elias Hargrove, the observatory's curator, discovered the absence of the celestial globe, a 17th-century masterpiece crafted by the astronomer Johannes Kepler himself. The globe, a bronze sphere encrusted with sapphires and emeralds to mark the constellations, was not merely an artifact but a symbol of astronomical precision, valued at a sum that could bankrupt a small nation. It had been locked in a reinforced glass case within the observatory's meridian room, a chamber accessible only to a select few. The case was intact, the lock unforced, yet the globe was gone. Hargrove, a wiry man with a shock of white hair and a nervous disposition, had greeted Holmes and Watson at the observatory's entrance, his hands wringing as he recounted the theft. "It's impossible, Mr. Holmes," Hargrove had exclaimed, leading them through the observatory's echoing halls. "The room was locked, the windows barred, and the guards swear no one entered after midnight. The symposium is in 3 days an international affair. The globe was to be the centerpiece. Its loss is a catastrophe." Holmes had listened in silence, his sharp features betraying no emotion as he absorbed Hargrove's tale. The meridian room was a cavernous space, its high ceilings adorned with frescoes of starry skies. The empty glass case stood at its center, surrounded by velvet ropes, a silent accusation of failure. Holmes circled it slowly, his eyes darting from the polished floor to the brass fittings of the case. Watson, accustomed to his friend's methods, waited patiently, though Hargrove fidgeted, clearly unnerved by the detective's intensity. "There is a faint scent here," Holmes remarked, pausing near the case. He leaned closer, his nose almost touching the glass. Lavender. Not the common sort, something refined, with a hint of bergamot. Unusual for a room dedicated to star charts and brass instruments. Lavender? Hargrove blinked, confused. I don't recall any such scent. Perhaps one of the staff? Holmes ignored the suggestion, his attention shifting to the floor. The parquet was polished to a mirror-like sheen, but beneath the case he noticed a faint scuff mark, barely visible in the dim light. Kneeling, he pressed his fingers against the wood, testing its give. A soft click echoed, and a small section of the floor shifted, revealing a trapdoor no larger than a man's shoulders. Watson gasped. Good Lord, Holmes, a hidden passage? Indeed. Holmes replied, his voice calm but laced with satisfaction. The thief was no phantom. They entered and exited here, bypassing the locks entirely. Hargrove's face paled. But that trapdoor hasn't been used in decades. It leads to the old coal tunnels beneath the observatory, long abandoned. Then we shall explore the abandoned, Holmes said, rising. He produced a small lantern from his coat, its light cutting through the gloom as he lifted the trapdoor. Fully, a narrow shaft descended into darkness, its walls slick with damp and moss. The air carried a musty chill, mingled with the faintest trace of that same lavender scent. Holmes, you can't mean to go down there. Watson protested, though he knew it was futile. We've no idea what's waiting. Then we shall discover it, Holmes said, already lowering himself into the shaft. Stay close, Watson, and keep your revolver at the ready. Reluctantly, Watson followed, his boots scraping against the iron rungs of a rusted ladder. Hargrove hesitated, then called after them. I'll fetch the guards. Be careful, gentlemen. The tunnel was a labyrinth of crumbling brick, its passages twisting beneath the observatory like the roots of some ancient tree. Holmes moved with purpose, his lantern casting long shadows that danced across the walls. The lavender scent grew stronger, guiding them like a ghostly thread through the maze. After several minutes, they emerged into a wider chamber, its floor littered with broken crates and rusted tools. At its center stood a small table, upon which rested a single item, a velvet pouch, its surface dusted with coal ash. Holmes opened the pouch, revealing a tiny dark sapphire, its facets glinting in the lantern's light. A curious choice. He murmured. The thief left this behind deliberately, I wager. Watson frowned. A sapphire from the globe. Why leave it here? Not from the globe, Holmes corrected, holding the gem to the light. This is a modern cut, not 17th century craftsmanship. A taunt, perhaps, or a misdirection. He pocketed the sapphire, his mind already racing with possibilities. The chamber offered no further clues, but as they retraced their steps to the surface, Holmes paused at a junction in the tunnel. He knelt again, examining the ground. Footprints, he noted. Small, narrow, likely a woman's boot, and recent. The lavender is strongest here. Our thief is meticulous, but not infallible. They emerged into the observatory's courtyard. Just as the fog began to lift, the first rays of dawn painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson. Hargrove and two guards met them, their faces a mixture of hope and dread. The globe? Hargrove asked, his voice trembling. Still at large, Holmes replied, his tone clipped but not unkind. But we have a trail to follow. A woman, likely, with a penchant for lavender and a knowledge of hidden passages. The sapphire suggests confidence, perhaps arrogance. We shall see where this leads. Watson, brushing coal dust from his coat, exchanged a glance with Holmes. A woman, you say? That's a new one. Not so new, Watson, Holmes said, a glint in his eye. The fairer sex can be as cunning as any man. Come, we have work to do. The discovery of the trapdoor and the sapphire marked a turning point, a tangible step forward in unraveling the theft. The chapter closed with Holmes and Watson returning to Baker Street, the sapphire in Holmes' pocket and the lavender scent lingering in their minds. A promise of deeper secrets yet to be uncovered. The tunnel's damp air clung to Sherlock Holmes' coat as he and Dr. Watson climbed back into the Meridian room, the trapdoor creaking shut behind them. Professor Hargrove hovered nearby, his anxious eyes darting between the two men, but Holmes offered no immediate reassurance. His mind was already dissecting the morning's findings, the hidden passage, the lavender scent, the sapphire left so deliberately in the abandoned coal chamber. The theft of the celestial globe was no mere act of greed. It was a calculated move, laced with audacity and precision. As they stepped into the courtyard, the fog had begun to dissipate, revealing the observatory's domed silhouette against a sky now streaked with dawn's amber light. Back at 221 B. Baker Street, Holmes settled into his armchair, the sapphire resting on the table beside him, catching the flicker of the firelight. Watson, ever the pragmatist, poured them both a brandy, though his own glass remained untouched as he paced the room. "Ah, woman, Holmes?" he asked again, unable to let the notion go. "You're certain?" "Not certain, Watson, but strongly inclined," Holmes replied, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. The footprints were small, the lavender a distinctly feminine choice. Yet the execution, the trapdoor, the unforced lock, suggests a mind trained in subterfuge. This is no ordinary thief. Watson sank into the opposite chair, his brow furrowed. But why leave the sapphire? It's worth a fortune on its own. Holmes' eyes narrowed, his voice low and deliberate. A message, perhaps, or a distraction. The sapphire is modern, not part of the globe's ancient design. Our thief wishes us to know they are no common criminal. They are playing a game. Watson and I intend to play it better. The room fell silent, save for the crackle of the fire. Holmes' mind churned, piecing together the puzzle. The trapdoor, known only to a few. The lavender, a rare blend. The sapphire, a taunt or a clue. The celestial globe was more than a treasure. It was a key, though to what, he had yet to determine. For now, the sapphire and the scent were enough to set him on the trail, and the thrill of the chase was a satisfaction in itself. The chapter closed with the promise of a deeper mystery, the first thread of a complex web now firmly in Holmes' grasp. The journey back to Baker Street was quiet. The clatter of the hansom cab's wheels on the cobblestones, a steady rhythm beneath Watson's thoughts. He glanced at Holmes, whose profile was sharp against the passing gaslights, his expression unreadable but alive with that familiar intensity. The sapphire, now wrapped in a handkerchief in Holmes' pocket, seemed to weigh heavier than its size suggested. The lavender scent, though faint, lingered in Watson's memory, a ghostly reminder of the thief who had outwitted the observatory's defenses dotted their lodgings. Mrs. Hudson greeted them with her usual warmth, though her eyes widened at their disheveled stake-cold dust smudged on Watson's cuffs, Holmes' cape damp from the tunnel's dampness. "You'll catch your death in those tunnels, Mr. Holmes," she chided. But he waved her off with a distracted smile. Already ascending the stairs in their sitting room, Holmes lit a pipe, the tobacco's earthy aroma mingling with the fire's warmth. He placed the sapphire on the mantel, its facets glinting like a star plucked from the heavens. "What do you make of it, Watson?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already had his own theories. Watson, loosening his collar, considered the question. "It's bold, I'll give them that. To steal the globe without breaking the case, to know of the trapdoor, to leave a gem behind, it's as if they wanted to be followed." "Precisely," Holmes said, exhaling a plume of smoke. "This is no theft for profit alone. The globe's value lies not only in its gems, but in its history. Kepler himself designed it, and its engravings are said to hold secret star charts, perhaps, or something more arcane. Our thief knows this, and they wish us to know they know." Watson frowned, sipping his brandy at last. But who? And why the lavender? Holmes leaned forward, his eyes alight. "The lavender is a signature, Watson. A rare essence, costly and specific. I suspect we shall find its source in London's less reputable quarters of perfumery, perhaps, or an apothecary with a penchant for exotic blends. As for who, the trapdoor suggests intimate knowledge of the observatory, and the footprints point to a woman of slight build but considerable cunning. We shall start our search tomorrow." The night deepened, and Holmes fell into one of his contemplative silences, his pipe smurgoing at intervals. Watson, exhausted but intrigued, retired to his room, leaving Holmes to his thoughts. The sapphire gleamed softly on the mantel, a silent challenge from an unseen foe. The chapter ended with the two men retiring for the night, the mystery of the celestial globe's theft unresolved, but its first clues secured. A satisfying step toward the truth. The morning had been a revelation, and now, in the quiet of their Baker Street rooms, Holmes and Watson began to unravel its meaning. The trapdoor, a relic of the observatory's coal-hauling days, suggested a thief with access to forgotten knowledge. The lavender scent, so distinct and deliberate, hinted at a personal touch, a signature, as Holmes had said. The sapphire, a modern gem left in place of the globe's ancient ones, was a puzzle in itself. Holmes sat by the fire, his eyes half closed, his mind a whirl of calculations. Watson, ever practical, broke the silence. "Holmes, do you think this thief is mocking us?" "Possibly," Holmes replied, his voice soft but sharp. "Or they are testing us. The sapphire is a breadcrumb. Watson too obvious to be accidental. This is a mind that enjoys the game as much as the prize." Watson nodded, his military instincts bristling at the thought of being outplayed. "What's our next move?" Holmes tapped his pipe against his lips, his eyes glinting with the thrill of the chase. "We follow the scent, Watson. Lavender. And bergamot rare, costly. There are few places in London where such a blend could be procured. Tomorrow we shall visit the city's finest perfumeries and see who has been buying such a fragrance." The fire crackled, casting flickering shadows across the room. The sapphire sat on the mantel, a silent promise of answers yet to come. Holmes leaned back, his mind already mapping the streets of London's East End, where he suspected the trail would lead. Watson watched him, knowing that Holmes was on the scent, and no thief, however clever, could evade him for long. The chapter closed with the two men planning their next steps, the sapphire's gleam a beacon of progress in a case that promised to test even Sherlock Holmes. prodigious intellect that the streets of London were still cloaked in the remnants of the night's fog as Holmes and Watson stepped out into the crisp morning air the next day. Holmes had been up before dawn, his mind too restless to sleep, and Watson, though weary, matched his friend's pace as they made their way to the hansom cab waiting outside. The sapphire, now safely tucked in Holmes' pocket, was a constant reminder of the thief's audacity, and the lavender scent still vivid in his memory urged him forward. Their first stop was a perfumery in Spitalfields, a narrow shop tucked between a butcher and a tavern, its windows adorned with delicate glass bottles. The proprietress, a sharp-eyed woman named Madame Elise, greeted them with a guarded smile, her hands smoothing her apron as she assessed the two men. Holmes wasted no time, his voice crisp as he described the lavender bergamot blend. Madame Elise's eyes flickered with recognition, though she maintained her composure. "A rare scent," she admitted. "I've sold only a few bottles this year. One, I recall, to a cloaked figure paid in cash, no name given." Holmes pressed further, his gaze piercing. "A woman, perhaps? Slight of build?" The woman hesitated, then nodded. "I couldn't see much, but yes, likely a woman." The cloak was heavy, but the voice was soft, cultured. Watson exchanged a glance with Holmes, his pulse quickening. A woman, just as Holmes had surmised. The perfumery offered no further clues, but as they stepped back into the street, Holmes' expression was one of quiet triumph. "We're closing." "In Watson," he said, his voice low and steady. "The scent is our guide, and it will lead us to her." The chapter closed with the two men returning to their cab, the sapphire in Holmes' pocket, and the lavender scent, now a tangible clue, pointing them toward the East End's shadowy corners. The trail was warm, the game afoot, and the satisfaction of a solid lead fueled their resolve. The rest of the day was a blur of visits to perfumeries and apothecaries, each one a dead end until they reached a small, dimly lit shop in Whitechapel. The air was thick with the scent of herbs and chemicals, and the shopkeeper, an elderly man with ink-stained fingers, confirmed the sale of a lavender bergamot blend to a woman of refined manners and a veiled face. She paid well, he said, his voice gruff. Didn't ask questions. Holmes' eyes gleamed with the thrill of confirmation. "Describe her," he demanded. "Small, quick-moving," the shopkeeper said. "Dark cloak, gloves, didn't see her face. Spoke like a lady, though." Watson's jaw tightened. "A lady thief," he muttered, half to himself. Holmes' smile was razor-sharp. "A lady with a taste for the theatrical, Watson. She's left us a sapphire and a scent too. Follow. She wants us to chase her." The chapter ended with Holmes and Watson back at Baker Street, the sapphire now joined by a small vial of the lavender bergamot blend, purchased from the shopkeeper for analysis. The scent filled the room as Holmes opened the vial, its aroma a silent challenge from the thief. The trail was clear now, a woman, cunning and bold, with a penchant for rare perfumes and ancient secrets. Holmes' mind was alight with the puzzle, and the satisfaction of a narrowing search set the stage for the next move. The sapphire gleamed in Holmes' hand as he turned it over, its facets catching the light of the gas lamp in their Baker Street sitting room. The day's investigations had yielded results. The lavender bergamot scent was indeed rare, sold only by a handful of perfumers in London, and the description of the mysterious woman was consistent, slight, cloaked, with a voice that suggested education and refinement. Watson sat across from him, his notebook open, scribbling details from their latest interview with a perfumer in Shoreditch. "She's clever, Holmes," Watson said, looking up. "To know about the trapdoor, to leave no trace but a single gem and a scent, she's leading us somewhere." Holmes nodded, his eyes fixed on the sapphire. "She's testing us, Watson. The sapphire is a gauntlet thrown down. The lavender, a signature. She knows the globe's secrets, and she wants us to know she knows." Watson set his pen down, his mind turning over the facts. But what secrets? The globe's a work of art, surely, but what else? Holmes leaned back, his pipe rekindled. "Kepler's globe is said to contain engravings of a lost constellation, Watson. A map to something greater knowledge, perhaps. Or power. Our thief believes it, and she's daring us to find out." The chapter closed with Holmes placing the sapphire and a vial of perfume side by side on the table, their combined presence a tangible link to the thief. The lavender scent, wafted faintly, a reminder of her presence, and the sapphire's glow promised answers yet to come. Holmes' mind was already racing ahead, plotting the next steps in a game that felt personal, the satisfaction of a clear trail tempered by the challenge of a foe who relished the chase. The fog had lifted by evening, leaving London's streets sharp and cold as Holmes and Watson made their way back to Baker Street. The day's work had been fruitful. The lavender bergamot scent was a rarity, and the woman who purchased it was no mere thief but a mastermind with a purpose. Holmes sat by the fire, the sapphire in his hand, its weight a reminder of the stakes. Watson, nursing a glass of brandy, broke the silence. "She's out there, Holmes. A woman who knows the observatory's secrets, who leaves gems and scents as calling cards. What's her game?" Holmes' eyes gleamed with the challenge. "She's not after money alone, Watson. The globe's engravings hold something more, perhaps a code, a map, or a truth lost to time. She's left us enough to follow her, and I intend to oblige." The chapter ended with the sapphire and the vial of perfume on the mantel, their presence a silent promise of the chase to come. Holmes' mind was a storm of theories, each one a step closer to the thief. The satisfaction of a solid lead was tempered by the knowledge that this woman was no ordinary adversary. She was a shadow who wanted to be seen, and Holmes was ready to step into the light. The night was deep and quiet, the only sound the distant clatter of hooves on Baker Street. Holmes stood at the window, the sapphire in his hand, its cool surface a contrast to the fire's warmth. Watson sat at the table, his notes spread before him, the lavender scent still lingering in his senses. "She's playing with us, Holmes," Watson said, his voice low. "The sapphire, the scent, it's all deliberate." Holmes turned, his silhouette sharp against the gaslight. "Indeed, Watson. She's a mind that revels in the game. The globe is more than a treasure. It's a key to something ancient, something she believes is worth the risk." The chapter closed with Holmes setting the sapphire beside the vial of perfume, their combined presence a challenge accepted. The lavender scent filled the air, a ghostly reminder of the woman who had outwitted them for now. The trail was clear. The game was on, and the satisfaction of a tangible clue fueled Holmes' relentless pursuit. The final stop of the day was a small apothecary in Limehouse, its shelves lined with bottles and jars of every scent imaginable. The shopkeeper, a wiry man with a limp, confirmed the sale of a lavender bergamot blend to a woman in a cloak, her voice soft but commanding. She was no ordinary customer, he said. Paid in gold, left no trace but the scent. Holmes' eyes narrowed, his mind cataloging every detail. "A woman of means and mystery," he said to Watson as they stepped into the street. "She's leading us on a chase, and I intend to catch her." Watson nodded, his resolve matching. "Holmes, what's her endgame, Holmes? The globe's worth a fortune, but this feels personal." Holmes' smile was sharp as a blade. The globe's engravings, Watson Kepler's own work. They may hold secrets of the stars, a map too. Something greater. She's left us a sapphire and a scent to ensure we follow. Chapter 2. The Lavender Trail. The fog clung to the cobblestones of London's East End like a jealous lover, reluctant to release its grip as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson navigated the narrow alleys. The faint glow of gaslights flickered, casting long shadows that danced with the mist. Holmes' keen eyes scanned the street, his mind already dissecting the clue that had brought them here, the delicate scent of lavender, detected in the Royal Observatory's display room. It was no ordinary fragrance, but a rare, almost otherworldly essence, sharp yet fleeting, like a whisper of something forbidden. Watson, bundled in his overcoat, kept pace, his boots clicking against the damp stone. "Lavender, Holmes, Watson," remarked, his breath visible in the chill air. An odd choice for a thief to leave behind. Perfume, perhaps. Or some chemical residue? Holmes' lips twitched into a faint smile, though his eyes remained fixed on the path ahead. "Not perfume, Watson. A signature. Our thief is meticulous, deliberate. The scent was no accident. It's a breadcrumb, meant to be followed. Or perhaps a taunt." They turned onto a crooked street lined with sagging storefronts, their signs weathered and peeling. The air grew heavier with the mingled odors of coal smoke, stale beer, and something sweeter, more refined. Holmes stopped abruptly, his head tilting as he inhaled deeply. "There," he said, pointing to a small, unassuming shop wedged between a pawnbroker and a tavern. Its sign read Elise's Essences, the letters curling in an elegant script that seemed out of place in this gritty corner of the city. The shop's window was dark, its curtains drawn, but a sliver of light escaped from beneath the door. Holmes approached, his gloved hand testing the handle. Locked, he produced a slender pick from his coat and, with a few deft movements, coaxed the lock open. Watson glanced over his shoulder, wary of passers-by. But the street was deserted save for the fog. Inside, the air was thick with competing scents: rose, jasmine, sandalwood, but the lavender note stood out, sharp and distinct. Shelves lined the walls, crowded with glass vials and bottles, their contents glinting in the dim light of a single oil lamp. Behind a cluttered counter sat a woman, her silver hair pinned in a severe bun, her eyes narrowing as she looked up from a ledger. Madame Elise, the proprietress, was a figure of quiet intensity, her hands stained with the faint purple of her trade. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice low and measured, "this is no hour for custom. State your business." Holmes stepped forward, his presence filling the small room. "Madame Elise, I presume we are here about a theft." "A celestial globe taken from the Royal Observatory." "I believe you may have information pertinent to our inquiry." Her expression remained impassive, though her fingers tightened around the pen in her hand. "I know nothing of stolen globes. I sell essences, not secrets." Holmes' gaze flicked to the ledger on the counter, its pages filled with tight, coded script. "Yet your lavender essence, a rare blend, was present at the scene. Sold recently, perhaps? To a cloaked figure, elusive and careful? Madame Elise's eyes widened for a fraction of a second before she regained her composure. "You're mistaken, Mr. Holmes, Sherlock Holmes." He leaned closer, his voice soft but unyielding. "And I am rarely mistaken. The lavender is yours, madame. Deny it, and we shall have a longer conversation at Scotland Yard." She hesitated, then sighed, setting the pen down. "Very well. I sold a vial of my rarest lavender essence 3 days ago. The buyer was cloaked, as you say, and paid in gold sovereigns. They gave no name, and I asked for none. That is all. No." Holmes' eyes gleamed. "Not quite all, I think." He reached for the ledger, ignoring her sharp intake of breath. "This code's simple, but clever. A substitution cipher, yes? Used by those who wish to conceal their dealings. Shall I decipher it for you, or will you save us the trouble?" Madame Elise's composure cracked, her hands trembling slightly. "You overstep, Mr. Holmes. That ledger is private." "Then you leave me no choice." Holmes flipped open the book, his fingers tracing the lines of cryptic symbols. Watson watched, fascinated, as Holmes' mind worked, his eyes darting across the page. Within minutes, he closed the ledger with a snap. "A meeting, madame. Tomorrow night, at a warehouse in Limehouse. The Order of the Saffron Veil, I presume? Your buyer is one of their number." Her face paled, but she said nothing. Holmes pressed on. "The Order is no myth. Astronomers, scholars, perhaps a few fanatics, bound by a shared obsession with the stars. The globe is their prize, but why? Tell me, madame, or I shall ensure Inspector Lestrade takes an interest in your shop." She stood, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am no member of their order. I only supply what they ask. The lavender was for a ritual, they said. Something about a star map, a key to secrets hidden in the heavens. The warehouse is where they meet, but I know nothing more. I swear it." Holmes studied her, then nodded. "Very well. But know this, if you warn. Then I will know, and I will return." As they left the shop, Watson glanced at Holmes. "Do you believe her?" "Partially," Holmes replied, his eyes scanning the fog-shrouded street. "She's a cog in a larger machine, Watson. The Order of the Saffron Veil is real, and the globe is more than a bauble. It's a key, perhaps to something far greater than we yet understand." The next evening, under a sky bruised with clouds, Holmes and Watson made their way to Limehouse. The warehouse loomed at the end of a desolate quay, its windows boarded, its walls streaked with grime. The scent of the Thames mud and decay mingled with the faint trace of lavender that still lingered in Holmes' memory. He motioned for Watson to follow, and they slipped through a side door, their footsteps muffled by years of dust. Inside, the warehouse was a cavern of shadows, crates stacked high, their contents obscured. A low murmur of voices drew them to a corner where a circle of cloaked figures stood around a table, a single candle casting flickering light on their faces. Holmes crouched behind a crate, Watson at his side as they listened. "The globe is secure," one figure said, their voice low and urgent. "But the map is incomplete. Without the key, the star of ether remains beyond our reach." Another voice, sharp and commanding, cut in. "The key is near. The cartographer assures us. It will be hours before the convergence." Holmes' eyes narrowed at the mention of the cartographer. He leaned closer, straining to hear, when a floorboard creaked under Watson's boot. The voices stopped. A figure turned, their face hidden by a hood, and called out, "Who's there?" Holmes grabbed Watson's arm, pulling him deeper into the shadows. The figures scattered, their footsteps echoing as they searched the warehouse. Holmes' mind raced, calculating their options. He spotted a narrow staircase leading to a loft and gestured for Watson to follow. They ascended silently, crouching behind a pile of rotting sacks. Below, the search intensified. A cloaked figure approached the staircase, their lantern casting jagged beams across the walls. Holmes' hand tightened on his cane, ready to act, when a shout rang out from the far side of the warehouse. "Traitor!" A scuffle broke out, punches thrown, and a crate crashed to the floor. In the chaos, Holmes spotted a folded parchment slip from a cloaked figure's pocket, landing in the dust. "Watson now," Holmes whispered. They descended, Holmes snatching the parchment as they moved. The figures were too preoccupied with their internal betrayal to notice. Holmes and Watson slipped out the same door they'd entered, the night swallowing them as they fled. Back at 221B Baker Street, Holmes unfolded the parchment under the glow of his desk lamp. It was a fragment of a star map, its lines etched with precision, dotted with symbols that seemed to pulse with meaning. Watson peered over his shoulder. "What is it, Holmes?" "A piece of the puzzle," Holmes murmured, his fingers tracing the constellations. "The globe is not merely decorative. It's a cipher, Watson, a guide to something ancient and powerful. The Order seeks it, but they are not united. There's a fracture within their ranks, and this map is our way in." He leaned back, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of the chase. "Tomorrow we pursue the cartographer. But tonight we study this map. The stars, Watson, will lead us to the truth." The fragment lay on the table, its cryptic symbols a silent challenge. Holmes lit his pipe, the smoke curling upward like a question mark as the mystery deepened. Equals. Chapter 3. Shadows in the Warehouse. The fog clung to the cobblestones of London's East End like a conspirator, muffling the clatter of hooves and the distant cry of a night watchman. Sherlock Holmes, his greatcoat blending into the mist, moved. With the precision of a shadow, his eyes fixed on the derelict warehouse ahead. Beside him, Dr. John Watson kept pace, his hand resting lightly on the revolver in his pocket, his breath visible in the chill night air. The lavender trail had led them here, to a crumbling edifice by the Thames, where the air was thick with the scent of damp wood and secrets. Holmes paused at the warehouse's iron gate, his gloved fingers tracing the rusted lock. "Observe, Watson," he whispered, his voice low but sharp. "The lock is new, yet the gate is ancient. Someone has taken pains to secure this place without drawing attention." He produced a slender pick from his coat, and with a few deft movements, the lock yielded with a soft click. The gate creaked open, revealing a courtyard littered with broken crates and the skeletal remains of old machinery. Watson's eyes darted to the dark windows above. "Holmes, this feels like a trap. That ledger you found at Madame Elisa's, how certain are you of its authenticity?" Holmes' lips twitched into a faint smile. "Certain enough to risk a midnight stroll, my dear Watson. The code was child's play, but its contents, a meeting of the Order of the Saffron Veil at this very warehouse, suggest a purpose far from trivial. The celestial globe is no mere trinket. Its theft was orchestrated with precision. We are close to answers, but we must tread lightly." They slipped through the courtyard, their footsteps silent on the damp earth. The warehouse loomed, its brick facade pitted by years of neglect. A faint glow flickered from a cracked window on the upper floor, betraying life within. Holmes gestured to a side door, half hidden by a pile of rotting barrels. "The main entrance is too obvious," he murmured. "This will do." Inside, the air was heavy with the musty odor of mold and oil. The ground floor was a labyrinth of crates and rusted machinery, the remnants of a once thriving dockside trade. Holmes moved with purpose, his eyes scanning the shadows for signs of disturbance. He paused at a pile of sawdust near a staircase, crouching to examine it. "Fresh," he said, rubbing it between his fingers. "Someone has been here recently, and they've been cutting wood. Curious for a supposedly abandoned warehouse." Watson frowned, his grip tightening on his revolver. "Building something or destroying it?" "Perhaps both," Holmes replied, rising. "Come, the light is above. Stay close." They ascended the creaking staircase, each step a test of nerve as the wood groaned under their weight. At the top, a narrow hallway stretched into darkness, punctuated by a sliver of light escaping from beneath a door. Voices, low and urgent, drifted through the wood. Holmes pressed himself against the wall, motioning for Watson to do the same. He leaned close to the door, his ear nearly touching the splintered surface. Double quotes, ... The globe is secure, but the map. "Fragment is incomplete," a man's voice said, clipped and authoritative. "Without the full chart, we cannot proceed to the convergence." A woman's voice, sharp and impatient, cut in. "Then we retrieve the fragment. The order has waited centuries for this moment. The star of ether will not elude us again." Holmes' eyes gleamed in the dim light. "The star of ether," he whispered to Watson. "A myth, or so I thought, yet they speak of it as tangible. And the map fragment, our thief, has all eyes, and they are divided." Watson's brow furrowed. "Allies who meet in secret in a place like this? Holmes, what is this order of the Saffron Veil?" "A question for another moment," Holmes replied, his voice barely audible. "For now we listen." The voices continued, revealing fragments of a plan. The celestial globe, it seemed, was more than a decorative relic. Its engravings held the key to decoding an ancient star map, one that pointed to the fabled star of ether, a relic of cosmic significance if the speakers were to be believed. The Order, a secret society of astronomers and mystics, had orchestrated the theft to unlock its secrets, but their plan was faltering. The map was incomplete, and trust among the group was fraying. Suddenly, a third voice broke in, harsh and accusatory. "You promised results, Cassandra. Yet here we are, with half a map and no globe. The cartographer will not be pleased." "The cartographer trusts me," the woman Cassandra snapped. "Unlike you, Darius, I don't fumble in the dark. The globe is safe, and the fragment will be ours before the week is out." Holmes' fingers tightened on his cane. "The cartographer," he mouthed to Watson, his eyes narrowing. "A leader, perhaps, or a financier. This grows more intricate by the moment." Before Watson could respond, a loud crash echoed from within the room, followed by a shout. "Traitor!" Darius roared. "You've sold us out!" The door burst open, and a figure stumbled into the hallway, clutching a bloodied arm. It was a man, wiry and pale, his eyes wide with panic. Behind him, a woman in a saffron-colored cloak. Cassandra presumably stood with a dagger in hand, her face a mask of cold fury. Two other figures, cloaked and hooded, emerged. One holding a pistol. Holmes acted swiftly, pulling Watson behind a stack of crates just as the group spilled into the hallway. The injured man staggered toward the staircase, but Cassandra's voice cut through the air. "Stop him. He's got the fragment." The man with the pistol raised his weapon, but Holmes was faster. With a flick of his wrist, he hurled his cane, striking the man's hand. The pistol clattered to the floor, and chaos erupted. Watson, ever the soldier, lunged forward, tackling the second cloaked figure before he could draw a weapon. Holmes darted toward the injured man, who was now slumped against the wall, clutching a folded piece of parchment. "Give it to me," Holmes said, his tone calm but commanding. The man, trembling, handed over the parchment before collapsing, blood pooling beneath him. Holmes slipped the fragment into his coat just as Cassandra's dagger flashed toward him. He sidestepped, grabbing her wrist and twisting it until the blade fell. She hissed, wrenching free, and vanished into the shadows of the hallway. "Holmes!" Watson called, pinning his opponent to the ground. The man with the pistol had recovered and was scrambling for his weapon. Holmes scooped it up, leveling it at the man. "Enough," he said, his voice like steel. "You will answer my questions, or you will answer to the law." The man froze, his hands raised. But before Holmes could interrogate him, a low rumble shook the warehouse. Dust rained from the ceiling, and the sound of splintering wood filled the air. The staircase. Watson shouted, glancing back. The old wood was giving way, weakened by years of rot and the weight of the scuffle. "Move!" Holmes barked, hauling Watson to his feet. They sprinted toward a side window as the floor began to buckle. The pinned man scrambled up, only to be caught by a falling beam. The warehouse groaned, and Holmes and Watson barely reached the window before the staircase collapsed entirely, cutting off their pursuers. They climbed onto the roof, the night air sharp against their faces. Below, the warehouse was a chaos of dust and shouts, but the fog offered cover. Holmes clutched the parchment fragment tightly, his mind already racing. "We have what they want," he said, his breath steady despite the ordeal. "But we are far from safe." Watson, panting, checked his revolver. "That was too close, Holmes. What's on that fragment?" Holmes unfolded the parchment under the faint glow of a gaslight. It was a section of a star map, etched in precise lines with symbols that seemed to pulse with meaning. "A piece of the puzzle," he said, his voice tinged with excitement. "The globe's engravings will complete it, but these symbols, they are unlike any constellation I know. We must decipher them, Watson, and quickly." They descended. A fire escape, melting into the fog as the distant wail of police whistles pierced the night. The Order of the Saffron Veil was in disarray, but Cassandra and her allies were still at large, and the cartographer's shadow loomed over them all. The fragment in Holmes' pocket was a victory, but the mystery of the celestial globe and the Star of Ether was far from solved. The journey back to Baker Street was silent, each man lost in thought. Holmes' mind churned over the symbols, the order, and the elusive cartographer. Watson, nursing a bruised shoulder, marveled at his friend's unflappable calm. The warehouse had been a crucible, forging new questions from the ashes of danger. As they reached their lodgings, the first light of dawn broke through the fog, casting a pale glow over London. The game was afoot, and the stakes had never been higher. In the days that followed, Holmes pored over the map fragment, cross-referencing it with every astronomical text he could procure. The symbols defied easy interpretation, blending elements of ancient Sumerian and Greek astronomy with something older, stranger. Watson, meanwhile, kept watch for signs of pursuit, his revolver never far from hand. The order had been shaken, but their reach was long, and the fragments theft would not go unanswered. Holmes' study became a warren of charts and books, the air thick with pipe smoke as he worked. "The globe is the key," he said one evening, holding the fragment to the light. "Its engravings align with these symbols, but without it we are blind. The order seeks the star of ether, but what is it? A jewel? A weapon? Or something beyond our understanding?" Watson, sipping tea, ventured a guess. Could it be a metaphor? Some philosophical ideal? Holmes shook his head. The order's actions suggest a tangible goal. The globe's theft, the map, the secrecy all point to a physical artifact of immense value. But its purpose, that is the heart of the matter. Their next lead came, unexpectedly, in the form of a letter slipped under their door. It was from Dr. Cornelius Finch, an astronomer Holmes had consulted in the past. The letter was brief, urgent. Finch claimed knowledge of the order and begged Holmes to meet him at his study in Bloomsbury. "He knows something," Holmes said, folding the letter, "and he is afraid. We must go at once." The journey to Bloomsbury was fraught with tension. The fog had lifted, but the city felt watchful, as if the order's eyes were everywhere. Finch's study was a cluttered sanctuary of telescopes and star charts, the man himself a nervous wreck. "Holmes," he said, his voice trembling, "I didn't want to be part of this. They forced me debts, threats, the globe. It's more than it seems." "Tell me everything," Holmes said, his tone brooking no refusal. Finch's story was a tangle of guilt and fear. He had been coerced by the order, his gambling debts used as leverage. The globe, he said, was a cipher, its gems marking coordinates on a star map that led to the star of ether. The fragment Holmes held was one of three, each guarded by a faction within the order. "The cartographer controls them all," Finch whispered. "But I don't know who he is, only that he's dangerous." Holmes' eyes narrowed. "And the warehouse? Who was there?" Finch hesitated, then named names. Cassandra, a zealot of the order; Darius, a hired thug; and others whose loyalty was uncertain. "They're fracturing," Finch said. "Cassandra wants the star for herself. Darius, he's just greedy." Holmes pressed Finch for more, but a noise outside, a carriage rattling too quickly, cut the conversation short. "Watson, the window," Holmes said, already moving. They slipped out just as the door burst open, revealing cloaked figures. The chase was on again, through the winding streets of Bloomsbury, but Holmes and Watson were seasoned in evasion. They lost their pursuers in an alley, returning to Baker Street with more questions than answers. The fragment remained their only tangible clue, its symbols a maddening riddle. Holmes spent hours sketching, calculating, and consulting ancient texts. Watson, ever practical, suggested a more direct approach. Find Cassandra or Darius, force the truth from them. But Holmes demurred. "Brute force will not unlock this mystery," he said. "The globe and the fragment are pieces of a larger machine. We must understand its design." Their breakthrough came late one night when Holmes, bleary-eyed from study, noticed a pattern in the symbols. "Ecliptic coordinates," he said, his voice alight with discovery. "The fragment maps a section of the sky, but it's incomplete. The globe's engravings will align with these points, revealing the star's location. But we need the other fragments, or the globe itself." Watson, exhausted but loyal, nodded. "Then we find them. But Holmes, the order won't let us walk away. Not after the warehouse." Holmes' smile was grim. "Let them come. We have the fragment, and they know it. The next move is theirs and ours." The days that followed were a tense waiting game. Holmes and Watson fortified Baker Street, their lodgings a fortress of vigilance. The fragment was hidden, its secrets guarded by Holmes' relentless mind. The order was out there, plotting. But Holmes was ready. The warehouse had been a skirmish. The war was yet to come. As the chapter drew to a close, Holmes stood by the window, gazing at the stars. "The universe is vast, Watson," he said, his voice soft but resolute. "But its secrets are not beyond us. The star of ether awaits, and we shall find it." Watson, watching his friend, felt a surge of resolve. The danger was real, the stakes unknown, but with Holmes leading the way, no mystery was too great. The fragment, the globe, the order, all were threads in a tapestry. Only Sherlock Holmes could unravel, and unravel it he would. Chapter 4. The Astronomer's Betrayal. The morning mist clung to the cobblestones of Baker Street, swirling around the hansom cab as it rattled to a stop outside 221B. Sherlock Holmes, his sharp features illuminated by the dim glow of a gas lamp, stepped out first, his long coat billowing slightly in the damp air. Dr. John Watson followed, his expression a mixture of curiosity and exasperation. As was often the case when Holmes dragged him into the heart of a mystery without so much as a hint of the destination. "Holmes," Watson said, adjusting his hat as he glanced up at the familiar windows of their lodgings, "you've been maddeningly silent since we left the warehouse. Care to enlighten me on where we're headed next? Or shall I continue playing the role of the bewildered chronicler?" Holmes' lips twitched into a faint smile, his gray eyes glinting with that peculiar intensity that signaled his mind was racing. "Patience, Watson. The threads of this case are beginning to weave together, but we must tread carefully. Our next step lies with an old acquaintance, one whose knowledge of the heavens may shed light on the shadows cast by that stolen globe." Watson raised an eyebrow, sensing the weight behind Holmes' words. "An acquaintance? You mean to say we're not chasing after that secret society you mentioned, the Order of the Saffron Veil?" "Not directly, no," Holmes replied, ascending the steps to their door. "The Order is but one piece of the puzzle. The celestial globe, however, is the key, and its significance extends beyond mere theft. We need someone who understands its astronomical import. Come, we've no time to waste." Inside, the sitting room was its usual chaos of papers, chemical apparatus, and the lingering scent of tobacco. Holmes strode to his desk, rifling through a stack of letters until he produced a crumpled envelope bearing a university crest. "Dr. Cornelius Finch," he said, holding it up. "An astronomer of some repute, though his personal habits have often eclipsed his professional achievements. He's our man." Watson frowned, settling into his armchair. Finch, the name rings a bell. Wasn't he involved in some scandal a few years back? "Gambling debts, if I recall correctly." "Precisely," Holmes said, his tone clipped. "A brilliant mind, but one easily swayed by the lure of the card table. If anyone in London can decipher the engravings on that globe or the fragment of the star map we secured last night, it's Finch, and, I suspect, he may know more about this affair than he'd care to admit. The journey to Finch's residence in Bloomsbury took them through the bustling heart of London, where the clamor of street vendors and the clatter of hooves filled the air. Finch's home, a modest terraced house with ivy creeping up its facade, seemed an unlikely abode for a man of his reputation. Holmes knocked sharply, and after a moment, the door creaked open to reveal a disheveled figure in a worn dressing gown, his eyes bleary behind wire-rimmed spectacles. "Sherlock Holmes?" "Sherlock Holmes." Dr. Cornelius Finch's voice was a mix of surprise and apprehension. "What brings you here at this hour?" "Business, Finch," Holmes said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Business that concerns a certain celestial globe and a theft that has the Royal Observatory in an uproar." Finch's face paled, and he gestured for them to enter. The parlor was a cluttered shrine to astronomy. Star charts plastered the walls. A telescope stood by the window, and books on celestial navigation spilled across every surface. Yet there was an air of neglect, as though the room's occupant had been distracted by more pressing concerns. Watson observed Finch closely. The man was in his late 40s, with thinning hair and a nervous tic in his left hand. His eyes darted to Holmes, then to the floor, as if avoiding scrutiny. "I've heard about the theft," Finch said, his voice unsteady. "Terrible business." "But why come to me?" Holmes fixed him with a piercing stare. "Because, Finch, you were consulted by the Royal Observatory 3 months ago to authenticate the globe's engravings. You spent an entire day examining it, did you not? And yet, when it vanished, you made no effort to contact the authorities or me." Finch swallowed hard, sinking into a chair. I didn't think it necessary." "I'm no detective, Holmes. My expertise lies in the stars, not in crime." "Indeed," Holmes said, pacing the room. "But the stars have a way of aligning with human affairs, don't they? Tell me, Finch, what did you find when you examined the globe? And do not waste my time with denials. I can see the guilt written in the tremor of your hands." Watson, standing by the door, felt a familiar thrill. Holmes was in his element, unraveling a man's secrets with the precision of a surgeon. Finch, however, seemed on the verge of collapse. "I didn't steal it, Holmes," he stammered. "I swear it, but I may have been involved." Holmes stopped pacing, his eyes narrowing. "Go on." Finch ran a hand through his hair, his voice dropping to a whisper. "It started with my debts. You know how it is: cards, horses, a few bad nights at the club. I owed a fortune to a man known only as the cartographer. He's not the sort you cross, Holmes. When he came to me, he knew about the globe. Said it was more than a relic, that it held secrets tied to an ancient star map. He wanted my help to facilitate its removal." Watson's jaw tightened. "You helped a thief steal from the Royal Observatory, not directly." Finch protested. I provided sketches of the globe's engravings. I told him about the display case, its lock. I didn't know they'd take it so soon. I thought I had time to warn someone, but the cartographer's men were watching me. They still are." Holmes' expression remained impassive, but Watson could sense the gears turning in his mind. "And the engravings?" Holmes pressed. "What makes them so valuable?" Finch hesitated, then stood and shuffled to a cluttered bookshelf. He pulled out a leather-bound volume, flipping to a page marked with a ribbon. "The globe's engravings aren't just decorative," he said. "They correspond to a star chart, one that's been lost for centuries. It's said to map a constellation, no longer visible to the naked eye, one tied to an ancient myth about a celestial artifact. The cartographer believes the globe is a key to finding it." Holmes took the book, his fingers tracing the intricate diagram of stars. "And you kept a copy of this chart, didn't you? Despite your claims of coercion, you couldn't resist the puzzle." Finch nodded miserably. "I made a tracing of the engravings before I handed them over. It's in my safe, behind the portrait." He gestured to a faded oil painting of a starry sky above the fireplace. Holmes crossed the room in 2 strides, lifting the painting to reveal a small iron safe embedded in the wall. "The combination, Finch," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. 749, Finch muttered. Slumping back into his chair, Holmes spun the dial with practiced ease, and the safe clicked open. Inside was a single sheet of parchment, yellowed with age, bearing a meticulously drawn star chart. The lines and symbols matched the fragment Holmes had recovered from the warehouse, but this was far more complete, with annotations and Finch's spidery handwriting. Watson peered over Holmes' shoulder. "Good Lord, Holmes, it's practically a map of the heavens." "What does it mean?" "It means," Holmes said, folding the chart carefully, "that the celestial globe is more than a museum piece. It's a cipher, Watson, a cipher to something far greater. And the cartographer, whoever he is, will stop at nothing to possess it." The rest of the day unfolded in a whirlwind of activity. Holmes, with the star chart in hand, interrogated Finch further, extracting every detail of his dealings with the cartographer. The shadowy figure had approached Finch months earlier, offering to clear his debts in exchange for information about the globe. Finch, desperate and cornered, had complied, though he claimed he never saw the cartographer's face, only communicated through intermediaries who wore saffron-colored cloaks, a hallmark of the order. "They're fanatics," Finch said, his voice trembling. "They believe the globe and its map lead to something divine, a source of knowledge that could reshape the world. I thought they were mad, but their resources, their reach, it's terrifying." Holmes listened intently, his mind cataloging every word. "And where does the cartographer conduct his business?" he asked. Finch shook his head. "I don't know. The intermediaries always came to me, but I overheard one mention a masked ball in Mayfair tomorrow night. They said the cartographer would be there, arranging the next phase of their plan." Holmes' eyes gleamed. "A masked ball. Perfect. Anonymity is their shield, but it will be our weapon. Finch, you will redeem yourself by aiding us. You'll help us gain entry to this ball and identify the cartographer." Finch looked as though he might faint. "Holmes, if they find out I've betrayed them, they won't," Holmes said firmly. "You'll play your part, and we'll ensure your safety. Watson, we'll need disguises something befitting a Mayfair gala, and a plan to draw the cartographer into the open." Watson nodded, though his mind was already racing with the implications. A masked ball, a secret society, a stolen globe. Tied to an ancient star map, this case was growing more intricate by the hour. Yet there was a thrill in it, a challenge that only Holmes could meet with such relish. As evening fell, Holmes and Watson returned to Baker Street to prepare. Mrs. Hudson, ever the saint, provided a cold supper while Holmes sketched out their strategy. "The cartographer will be cautious," Holmes said, pacing before the fire. "But he's also arrogant. He believes his anonymity protects him. We'll use that against him. Finch will introduce us as wealthy patrons interested in the Order's cause. Once we're inside, we observe, we listen, and we wait for him to reveal himself." Watson chewed thoughtfully on a slice of roast beef. "And if he doesn't? What if this cartographer is as slippery as you suspect?" "Then we make him slip," Holmes said, a dangerous edge to his voice. "The star chart and the globe are linked, Watson. If we can't catch the cartographer, we'll use the chart to anticipate his next move. But I'd wager he'll be at that ball, unable to resist the lure of his own scheme." The following morning, Holmes dispatched a telegram to Lestrade requesting discreet surveillance around the Mayfair venue a precaution, he said, in case the Order had more muscle than anticipated. He then turned his attention to their disguises, enlisting the aid of a theatrical costumer in Covent Garden. By noon, Watson found himself fitted with a powdered wig and a velvet coat that made him feel like a character in a restoration comedy, while Holmes transformed into a hawkish nobleman, complete with a silver mask that accentuated his piercing eyes. Finch, meanwhile, was a bundle of nerves, but Holmes' unyielding confidence seemed to bolster him. "You'll do fine, Finch," Holmes said as they boarded a cab to Mayfair. "Just follow my lead and keep your wits about you." The ball was held in a grand mansion, its chandeliers casting a golden glow over a sea of masked figures. Music swirled through the air, and the scent of roses mingled with the chatter of London's elite. Holmes, Watson, and Finch blended seamlessly into the crowd, their disguises flawless. Finch, trembling slightly, pointed out a group of figures in Finja. "Saffron-trimmed cloaks near a marble staircase. The Order," he whispered. "They're here," Holmes nodded, his eyes scanning the room. "Stay close, Finch. Watson, keep an eye on the exits. If the cartographer is here, he'll be watching for us as much as we're watching for him." For hours they mingled, Holmes, engaging in cryptic conversations with various guests, probing for hints of the cartographer's identity. Watson, ever vigilant, noted the subtle signals. Holmes gave a tilt of the head, a tap on his cane indicating which guests warranted closer scrutiny. Finch, to his credit, played his part, introducing Holmes as a wealthy eccentric with an interest in rare artifacts. Then, as the clock struck 11, a woman in a crimson gown and a star-shaped mask approached Holmes. Her movements were graceful, almost predatory, and her voice carried a faint accent Watson couldn't place. "You're the gentleman inquiring about the stars," she said, offering a gloved hand. "I hear you're quite enlightened." Holmes took her hand, bowing slightly. "And you, madam, must be someone of considerable knowledge. Perhaps we might discuss a certain celestial globe?" Her laugh was low, dangerous. "You're bold, sir, but the heavens are full of secrets, and not all are meant to be shared." She led him to the dance floor, and Watson watched, his heart pounding, as Holmes waltzed with the mysterious woman, their conversation masked by the music. The dance ended, and the woman slipped something into Holmes' hand, a locket. Watson realized, catching the glint of gold as Holmes pocketed it. She vanished into the crowd before he could follow, leaving Holmes with a grim smile. "Progress, Watson," he said, rejoining them. "The locket contains a star-shaped key. Our friend the cartographer is indeed here, and she's playing a dangerous game." "She?" Watson asked, stunned. Lady Evelyn Crane, Holmes said, his voice low. I recognized her scent lavender, the same as at the observatory. She's clever, but she underestimated me. This key will lead us to the next piece of the puzzle. Finch, pale as a ghost, stammered, You mean she's the cartographer? Possibly, Holmes said, or a very close ally. Either way, we have what we need for now. Let's return to Baker Street and examine this key. The night has been fruitful, but the game is far from over. As they left the mansion, Watson couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The star-shaped key, now in Holmes' possession, felt like both a victory and a warning. The celestial globe, the order, the cartographer, it was all converging, and Watson knew that the next step would bring them closer to the heart of the mystery, or to danger they could scarcely imagine, back at 221B. Holmes examined the locket under a magnifying glass, his fingers deftly opening it to reveal the key. It was small, intricately wrought, with tiny constellations etched into its surface. This, he said, is no ordinary key. It's a work of art, Watson, and it's meant for something specific. A lock, perhaps, or a mechanism within the globe itself. Watson leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. And Finch? Can we trust him to keep helping us? Holmes' eyes flickered with a rare warmth. Finch is a man caught in his own folly, but he's not without honor. He'll help us, if only to save himself. Tomorrow we'll follow this key's lead. I suspect it will take us somewhere unexpected, perhaps to the very heart of the orders. Plans. As the fire crackled in the hearth, Watson felt a surge of anticipation. The case of the stolen celestial globe was no longer just a theft. It was a quest, one that tied the stars above to the shadows below. And with Holmes at the helm, Watson knew they were on the brink of unraveling it all. Chapter 5. The Cartographer's Gambit. The fog clung to London streets like a conspirator, muffling the clatter of hooves and the distant cries of newsboys as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson stepped from their hansom cab onto the cobblestones of Mayfair. The air was heavy with the scent of coal smoke and anticipation, for tonight was no ordinary evening. The grand townhouse of Lord Reginald Ashburn loomed before them, its windows ablaze with golden light spilling onto the pavement, in defiance of the encroaching dusk. A masked ball, rumored to be the stage for the elusive figure known as the cartographer, awaited within a figure Holmes was determined to unmask. Holmes adjusted the black domino mask that concealed his sharp features, his eyes glinting with the intensity of a hawk sighting prey. His attire, a tailored suit of midnight blue with a silver cravat, transformed him into a convincing nobleman, though Watson knew the disguise was merely a tool for the detective's relentless mind. Watson, less comfortable in his own borrowed finery, a burgundy coat and a mask adorned with subtle gold filigree, shifted uneasily, his hand brushing the reassuring weight of his revolver beneath his cloak. "Steady, Watson," Holmes murmured, his voice low but carrying the weight of command. "Tonight we are not merely guests but hunters. The cartographer will be here, and I wager they will not resist the lure of this gathering. Keep your wits sharp and your eyes sharper." Watson nodded, his pulse quickening. The intelligence gathered from Dr. Cornelius Finch's confession had pointed to this event as the cartographer's next move. The stolen celestial globe, with its intricate engravings and gem-encrusted surface, was more than a relic. It was a key, and the cartographer, whoever they were, sought to wield it. Holmes had devised a plan to draw them out, using the ball as a trap, but the stakes were high. One misstep could see their quarry vanish into the shadows once more. Townhouse doors swung open, and the two men were swept into a world of opulence. Crystal chandeliers cast prisms of light across the ballroom, where masked figures swirled in a kaleidoscope of silk and satin. The strains of a waltz filled the air, played by a string quartet perched on a balcony above. Laughter and murmured. Conversations blended into a hum of decadence, but Holmes' gaze cut through the revelry like a blade. He scanned the crowd, noting the tilt of a head, the glint of a jewel, the subtle cues that betrayed intent. Watson followed close behind, his military bearing evident despite the disguise. "How do you propose to find this cartographer in such a throng?" he whispered, his eyes darting to a group of masked women in elaborate gowns, their laughter tinkling like glass. "The cartographer is no mere reveler," Holmes replied, his voice barely audible over the music. "They are a strategist, precise and deliberate. Look for someone who observes rather than participates, someone whose movements are calculated. And watch for the lavender, our thief's calling card." Holmes led the way to the edge of the dance floor, where a grand staircase spiraled upward to a mezzanine. From this vantage point, they could survey the room without drawing undue attention. Watson's gaze swept over the crowd, noting a tall figure in a black velvet cloak standing near a marble pillar, their posture suggesting quiet observation. "Holmes," Watson murmured, "that one, by the pillar. Could that be our mark?" Holmes' eyes narrowed. "Possibly. Note the cloak fine material, but unadorned. A choice of discretion. Let us test their mettle." Holmes descended the staircase with the grace of a panther, Watson following. The figure by the pillar stiffened slightly as they approached. Holmes adopted the air of a jovial nobleman. "Good evening," he called, raising a glass of champagne. "A splendid affair, is it not? I don't believe we've had the pleasure." The figure turned, revealing a silver filigree mask shaped like a crescent moon. The eyes behind it were sharp, feminine. "Indeed, sir," she replied, her voice low and smooth. "The evening is illuminating. And you are?" "Lord Percival." "Worthington," Holmes lied, bowing. "And my companion, Sir Henry Blackwood." Admirers of the stars, drawn by tales of celestial wonders. The woman's lips curved faintly. "Celestial wonders?" A curious interest for a nobleman. "Most here care more for titles than telescopes," Holmes chuckled. "I find the heavens more intriguing. Tell me, do you share such an interest, perhaps in celestial globes?" Her smile faltered briefly. "Globes are charming relics," she said. "But I prefer the stars themselves. They hold secrets no map can capture." "A poet as well as a scholar," Holmes said, stepping closer. "Might I have the honor of a dance?" She hesitated, then extended a gloved hand. "Very well, Lord Worthington. Let us see if your steps match your wit." Holmes led her to the dance floor, their figures blending into the waltz. Watson positioned himself nearby, catching the faint scent of lavender as she passed. The waltz was elegant, Holmes guiding her with ease. Their conversation was lost to the music, but Watson noted her poised demeanor, her eyes scanning the room even as she danced as the waltz ended. Holmes leaned closer, his voice a whisper. "A fine dancer, but I suspect your true talents lie elsewhere. The celestial globe, perhaps." Her eyes flashed, and in a swift motion she slipped from his grasp, her gown shimmering as she moved toward a side door. Holmes signaled Watson, and they pursued, weaving through the crowd. In the corridor beyond, she quickened her pace, but Holmes, anticipating her route, took a parallel hallway, cutting her off at a garden entrance. A brief struggle ensued. She was agile, her movements practiced, but as Holmes seized her wrist, a locket fell from her gown, clattering to the stone floor. She twisted free, vanishing into the fog, but Holmes retrieved the locket, opening it to reveal a star-shaped key. Watson caught up, breathless. "Is that?" Holmes held up the key, its silver surface catching the moonlight. "The next piece of our puzzle, Watson." The cartographer has shown their hand. The key gleamed with promise, a tangible clue to the celestial globe's secrets. Holmes pocketed it, his mind already racing toward the next step, while Watson felt a surge of triumph tempered by the mystery of the woman's identity. The night had yielded its prize, but the game was far from over. Chapter 6. The star-shaped key the rain had turned London's cobblestone streets into a glistening mirror of gaslight and shadow, each puddle reflecting the restless pulse of the city. Sherlock Holmes, his greatcoat billowing behind him like a dark sail, strode purposefully through the mist, with Dr. John Watson struggling to match his pace. The star-shaped key, retrieved from Lady Evelyn Crane's locket at the Mayfair ball, rested in Holmes' gloved hand, its intricate design catching the faint glow of a passing lamplight. To Watson, it seemed less a key than a talisman, its 5 pointed arms etched with celestial motifs that hinted at secrets older than the city itself. "Holmes," Watson panted, adjusting his hat against the drizzle, "you're certain this key will lead us to the globe?" "It could be a decorative trinket. Nothing more." Holmes' lips twitched into a faint smile, his eyes fixed ahead. "My dear Watson, nothing Lady Crane possesses is merely decorative. This key is the linchpin of our mystery, a bridge between the stolen celestial globe and the motives of its thief. Its design mirrors the engravings Dr. Finch described on the globe itself. We are not chasing trinkets, but answers." Their destination was the British Museum, a hulking silhouette against the stormy sky. Holmes had deduced, through a series of rapid connections Watson could scarcely follow, that the key's unique shape corresponded to a hidden vault rumored to exist beneath the museum's labyrinthine cellars. The museum, a repository of human history, held secrets beyond its public gallery's secrets that, according to Holmes, the Order of the Saffron Veil had guarded for centuries. As they approached the museum's grand portico, its columns looming like sentinels, Holmes slowed his pace. "The vault," he murmured, "is not marked on any architectural plan, but the Order's coded ledger, which I deciphered at Madame Elise's perfumery, referenced a chamber of stars beneath the museum's western wing. The key will unlock it, or so I wager." Watson frowned, his practical mind wrestling with the implications. "And if you're wrong?" "We're trespassing on government property, Holmes. The curator won't take kindly to us rummaging through their cellars." "Then we shall be discreet," Holmes replied, his tone carrying the confidence of a man who had already mapped every possible outcome. He produced a small leather case from his pocket, revealing a set of lockpicks that gleamed with practiced use. "The museum is closed, the guards predictable. Follow my lead, and we shall be in and out before the night watchman's next round." The two men slipped around the side of the building, where a service entrance, half hidden by ivy, offered access to the lower levels. Holmes knelt before the lock, his fingers moving with the precision of a surgeon. Within moments the door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Watson lit a small lantern, its feeble glow casting long shadows on the damp stone walls. The air grew colder as they descended, the scent of mildew and ancient dust replacing the rain-soaked freshness of the street. The staircase spiraled deeper than Watson expected, its steps worn smooth by centuries of unseen feet. At the bottom, they found a corridor lined with iron-bound doors, each marked with faded inventory numbers. Holmes moved swiftly, his eyes scanning for clues invisible to Watson's untrained gaze. "Here," Holmes said at last, stopping before a blank stretch of wall at the corridor's end. He ran his fingers over the stone, pausing at a faint indentation, shaped like a five-pointed star. "The Chamber of Stars," he whispered, fitting the key into the recess. It clicked into place with a satisfying thud, and a low grinding sound echoed through the corridor as a section of the wall slid aside, revealing a hidden passage. Watson's heart quickened. "Good Lord, Holmes, how did you know?" "The orders." "Ledger was precise," Holmes replied, stepping into the passage, "and the key's design was no accident. Come, Watson, time is our enemy tonight." The passage sloped downward, its walls carved with astronomical symbols, constellations, comets, and planets rendered in meticulous relief. The air grew heavier, tinged with a metallic tang that set Watson's nerves on edge. At the passage's end, they entered a circular chamber, its domed ceiling painted with a star map that seemed to shimmer in the lantern's light. In the center stood a stone pedestal, its surface inlaid with a star-shaped lock. Holmes inserted the key, and the pedestal rumbled, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside lay a leather-bound manuscript, its pages yellowed with age but adorned with vibrant ink diagrams of stars, cryptic runes, and annotations in a language Watson couldn't decipher. Holmes' eyes gleamed as he lifted the manuscript, his fingers tracing its cover. "The Order's secrets," he said softly. "This manuscript links the celestial globe to something far older, occult, or forgotten sect of astronomers. The globe is more than a relic, it's a cipher." Before Watson could respond, a faint click echoed from the passage behind them. Holmes' head snapped up, his expression sharpening. "We are not alone," he hissed, tucking the manuscript into his coat. He gestured for Watson to extinguish the lantern, plunging the chamber into darkness. Footsteps approached, slow, deliberate, and accompanied by the faint rustle of fabric. Watson's hand crept to the revolver in his pocket, his pulse hammering. Holmes, however, remained still, his silhouette barely visible against the star-painted ceiling. A figure emerged from the passage, cloaked and hooded, holding a lantern of their own. The light revealed a gloved hand clutching a slender blade. "Mr. Holmes," a woman's voice purred, low and dangerous. "You are as persistent as your reputation suggests." "Lady Crane," Holmes replied, his tone calm but edged with steel. "I wondered when you would reveal yourself again. You've been following us since the ball, I presume?" The hood fell back, revealing Lady Evelyn Crane's sharp features, her eyes glinting with a mix of amusement and menace. "You have something that belongs to the Order," she said, gesturing to the manuscript. "Return it, and I may let you leave this vault alive." Watson tightened his grip on the revolver, but Holmes raised a hand to stay him. "The Order of the Saffron Veil," Holmes said, stepping forward. "A quaint name for a group so obsessed with celestial power. Tell me, Lady Crane, what does the manuscript reveal? The location of the star of ether, perhaps." Her smile faltered, just for a moment. "You know more than you should," she said. "But knowledge is dangerous, Mr. Holmes. The star is not a myth, it is a key to truths beyond your comprehension." Before Holmes could respond, the chamber shuddered, and a low rumble filled the air. Dust cascaded from the ceiling as the walls began to shift, stone grinding against stone. Watson stumbled, catching himself against the pedestal. "Holmes," he shouted. "A trap." Lady Crane laughed, stepping back toward the passage. "The order protects its secrets," she said. "Enjoy your tomb, gentlemen." As she vanished into the shadows, the ceiling began to descend, its star map inching closer with every second. Holmes sprang into action, his eyes darting across the chamber. "The pedestal!" he barked, rushing to its side. "The key activated the vault, but it may also deactivate the trap." Watson joined him, sweat beading on his brow as the ceiling loomed closer. Holmes twisted the star-shaped key in its lock, then pressed his hands against the pedestals. Inlaid symbols, searching for a pattern. "The constellations," he muttered. "They're a sequence of code." His fingers moved with desperate precision, pressing the symbols in an order Watson couldn't follow. With a final click, the ceiling halted, mere inches from their heads. The walls stilled, and the chamber fell silent save for the pounding of Watson's heart. Holmes exhaled, retrieving the key and manuscript. "A crude mechanism," he said, as if they hadn't just escaped death. "But effective. Lady Crane underestimates us." Watson wiped his brow, his voice unsteady. "Underestimates you, perhaps. I'm not sure my heart can take another of your deductions." Holmes chuckled, a rare sound that echoed faintly in the chamber. "Come, Watson. We have the manuscript, and Lady Crane has revealed her hand. The game is afoot." They retraced their steps through the passage, emerging into the museum's cellar as the first light of dawn crept through a high window. Holmes clutched the manuscript tightly, its weight a promise of answers yet to come. Watson, still shaken, followed his friend into the gray morning, wondering what new dangers awaited them and what secrets the ancient text would reveal. The manuscript, when they examined it in the safety of 21B Baker Street, proved to be a labyrinth of knowledge. Its pages were filled with star charts, alchemical symbols, and passages in a script that blended Latin with an older, unknown tongue. Holmes, seated at his cluttered desk, pored over the text with a magnifying glass, his pipe sending curls of smoke into the air. "This is no mere astronomical record," he said at last, his voice tinged with excitement. "The manuscript describes a cult, the cult of the lost star, that revered a constellation erased from modern maps. They believed the celestial globe, when paired with a specific key, could reveal the location of the star of ether, an artifact said to hold cosmic truths." Watson, nursing a brandy by the fire, frowned. "Cosmic truths? Sounds like mysticism, Holmes. Surely you don't believe in such nonsense?" Holmes' eyes gleamed. "I believe in evidence, Watson. And the evidence suggests the globe and this manuscript are linked to a tangible goal, whether it's an artifact or a metaphor. We shall see. The cult's writings mention a convergence, a celestial event tied to the globe. Engravings. We must decode this further." Over the next hours, Holmes worked tirelessly, cross-referencing the manuscript's star charts with modern astronomical texts. Watson, despite his skepticism, assisted where he could. fetching books from Holmes' shelves and brewing endless pots of tea. By midday, Holmes had identified a key passage, a reference to a manor in Yorkshire, owned by a descendant of the cult, where a secret observatory held the next clue. The manor, Holmes said, leaning back in his chair, is our next destination. If the cult's legacy endures, we'll find answers there, and perhaps the globe itself. Watson groaned, already dreading the journey. Yorkshire, in this weather? You'll be the death of me, Holmes. Nonsense, Holmes replied, rising with renewed vigor. Pack your revolver, Watson. The cult of the Lost Star awaits. The train to Yorkshire rattled through the countryside, its windows streaked with rain. Holmes sat in silence, the manuscript open on his lap, his mind clearly racing through possibilities. Watson, lulled by the train's rhythm, reflected on the case's twists, the lavender scent, the coded ledger, the warehouse ambush, and now this ancient vault. Each step had brought them closer to the truth, yet the stakes felt higher than ever. Lady Crane's involvement and her connection to the Order suggested a conspiracy that reached beyond a simple theft at the Yorkshire station. A hired carriage took them through rolling moors to the manor, a crumbling edifice of grey stone perched on a windswept hill. Its windows were dark, its chimneys cold, yet an air of watchfulness hung over the place. Holmes, ever alert, scanned the grounds as they approached. The observatory, he said, pointing to a domed structure half hidden by overgrown yew trees. That's where we'll find our answers. The manor's door was unlocked, creaking open to reveal a dusty hall lined with portraits of stern-faced men and women, their eyes seeming to follow the intruders. Watson's hand rested on his revolver, the silence unnerving him more than any. Ambush. Holmes, undeterred, led the way to a staircase spiraling upward to the observatory. The dome was a marvel of engineering, its roof retractable to reveal the night sky. In the center stood a telescope, its brass gleaming faintly in the moonlight filtering through the open dome. Beside it was a table covered in charts and instruments, including a small wooden box engraved with the same star motifs as the key. Holmes opened the box, revealing a single sheet of parchment, a map marked with coordinates, and a cryptic phrase. "The star shines where the moor meets the sky." He studied it intently, his fingers tracing the lines. "The Yorkshire moors," he said. "The cult believed the star of ether was hidden there, aligned with their lost constellation. This map will lead us to it." Before Watson could respond, a floorboard creaked behind them. They turned to find a group of cloaked figures emerging from the shadows, their faces obscured by saffron veils. Lady Crane stepped forward, her blade glinting in the moonlight. "You are persistent, Mr. Holmes," she said, her voice cold. "But the star is not yours to claim." Holmes smiled, unfazed. "And you, Lady Crane, are predictable. Watson now." Watson fired a warning shot into the ceiling, scattering the cultists. Holmes seized the moment, grabbing the map and bolting for the stairs. The cultists gave chase, their shouts echoing through the manor as Holmes and Watson raced into the night. They fled across the moors, the map clutched tightly in Holmes' hand. Behind them, the cultists pursued, their lanterns bobbing like fireflies in the darkness. Holmes led the way, his knowledge of the terrain uncanny, until they reached a copse of trees where they could take cover. Breathing heavily, Watson peered through the branches. "They're still coming," he whispered. "What now?" Holmes studied the map, his eyes narrowing. "The coordinates point to a stone circle, not far from here. If we reach it before them, we may yet secure the star." They moved swiftly, guided by the map's cryptic directions. The moors stretched endlessly around them, the wind carrying the distant cries of their pursuers. At last they reached the stone circle, a ring of ancient monoliths silhouetted against the starry sky. Holmes knelt at its center, the map spread before him. "Here," he said, digging into the earth with his hands. Watson joined him, and together they unearthed a small iron-bound chest. Inside was a crystal shaped like a star, and glowing faintly with an inner light. "The star of ether," Holmes murmured, holding it aloft. Not a myth, but a reality. Before they could celebrate, the cultists emerged from the darkness surrounding the circle. Lady Crane stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the crystal. "Hand it over, Holmes," she demanded. "You cannot comprehend its power." Holmes slipped the crystal into his pocket, his expression calm. "Power is a fleeting illusion, Lady Crane. Knowledge is eternal. Watson, be ready." What followed was a blur of motion. Holmes dodging a cultist's blade, Watson firing to keep the others at bay. They fought their way free, sprinting back toward the manor where their carriage waited. By the time the cultists regrouped, Holmes and Watson were gone, the crystal and map safely in their possession. Back in London, Holmes sat by the fire at 221B, the crystal glinting on the table before him. "The manuscript and this crystal," he said, "are the keys to the globe's true purpose." The cult believed it could unlock cosmic knowledge, a map to the universe's secrets. Watson, bandaging a minor cut from their escape, shook his head. "And Lady Crane? She's still out there." "For now," Holmes replied, his eyes distant. "But we have the star and the manuscript. The game is far from over, Watson. Tomorrow we unravel the cult's final secrets." The night stretched on, the crystal's glow casting strange shadows across the room. Holmes lit his pipe, his mind already turning to the next move in a game that spanned centuries, stars, and the relentless pursuit of truth. Chapter 7. The cult of the lost star. Sherlock Holmes sat at his desk in the dimly lit study of 221B Baker Street. The ancient manuscript from the British Museum vault spread before him. The parchment, brittle and yellowed, seemed to hum with secrets, its cryptic symbols etched in faded ink that hinted at a forgotten era. The celestial globe's theft had unraveled a tapestry of intrigue, and this document was the latest thread. Dr. John Watson, seated across from him, sipped a cup of tea, his brow furrowed as he watched fingers trace the manuscript's lines. The manuscript, as Holmes had deduced, was no mere historical curiosity. Its text, a blend of Latin, Greek, and an obscure dialect he suspected was tied to a pre-Christian sect, spoke of a celestial artifact known as the Star of Ether. The cult that revered it, the Order of the Lost Star, believed it held the key to cosmic knowledge, an enlightenment that could elevate humanity or, in the wrong hands, sow chaos. The celestial globe, with its gem-encrusted constellations, was not merely decorative. It was a map, a guide to the star's resting place. Holmes' gray eyes gleamed as he deciphered a key passage. "When the heavens align, the star shall reveal its truth, hidden in the northern moors where the ancients gazed." "Northern moors," Watson mused, setting down his cup. "That's rather vague, Holmes. England's littered with moors. Could be anywhere from Yorkshire to Northumberland." Holmes leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Not so vague, Watson. The manuscript references a circle of stones under the seventh star, cross-referencing with astronomical records. I've identified a likely candidate, a prehistoric stone circle in Yorkshire, near a manor owned by one Sir Reginald Thorne, a reclusive antiquarian. His family's history intersects with obscure esoteric traditions, and I suspect he's a descendant of the cult's founders. Watson raised an eyebrow. A manor in Yorkshire? Sounds like a trek. And you're certain this Thorne chap is involved? Certainty is a luxury we seldom afford, Watson. But the clues converge. The manuscript's origin, the globe's engravings, and a curious detail from Dr. Finch's star chart, which marked a specific coordinate in Yorkshire. We shall pay Sir Reginald a visit. Pack your revolver. I suspect we'll need it. By noon, Holmes and Watson were aboard a train rattling north through England's green heart. The countryside blurred past, a patchwork of fields and hedgerows. Under a gray sky, Holmes, ever the observer, noted the passengers, a door vicar, a fidgety merchant, a woman in widow's weeds whose veiled glances seemed too keen for grief. Watson, accustomed to his friend's vigilance, scribbled notes in his journal, chronicling the case's twists. The lavender scent, the coded ledger, the star map fragment all pointed to a conspiracy older than the streets of London. The train deposited them in a sleepy Yorkshire village where a hired carriage took them to Thorne Manor. The estate loomed at the edge of a windswept moor, its Gothic spires piercing the mist like the bones of some ancient beast. The manor's stone facade was weathered, ivy clinging to its walls, as if trying to choke out its secrets. A butler, gaunt and unsmiling, greeted them at the door. Mr. Holmes. Dr. Watson, he intoned, his voice like dry leaves. Sir Reginald is expecting you. Curious, Holmes murmured to Watson as they followed the butler through a dimly lit hall. I sent no word of our arrival. The interior was a museum of the arcane, star charts framed in gilt, telescopes gleaming in alcoves, and shelves groaning under leather-bound tomes. Sir Reginald Thorne awaited them in a cavernous study, a tall man with a hawkish face and eyes that seemed to hold the weight of centuries. His manner was courteous but guarded, his hands clasped behind his back as he stood before a roaring fire. Mr. Holmes, your reputation precedes you, Thorne said, his voice smooth but tinged with wariness. To what do I owe this visit? Holmes wasted no time. The celestial globe stolen from Greenwich, Sir Reginald. I believe you know its significance as well as that of the Star of Ether. Thorne's expression flickered, a crack in his composure. I'm an antiquarian, Mr. Holmes, not a thief. I collect knowledge, not trinkets. Then you won't mind if I inspect your observatory, Holmes replied, his tone deceptively mild. The manuscript we recovered suggests it may hold answers. Thorne hesitated, then nodded. Very well, follow me. The observatory was a domed chamber atop the manor, its roof open to a sky bruised with clouds. A massive telescope dominated the room, its brass fittings gleaming. Star charts covered the walls, their constellations marked with annotations in the same script as the manuscript. Holmes' eyes darted across the room, cataloging details. A scuff on the floor, a faint whiff of incense, a locked cabinet with a star-shaped keyhole. Fascinating collection, Holmes said, circling the telescope. But I'm more interested in what's hidden, that cabinet, for instance. Thorne's jaw tightened. Private research, Mr. Holmes, nothing to concern you. On the contrary, Holmes said, producing the star-shaped key from Lady Crane's locket. "I believe this will prove most relevant." Before Thorn could protest, a low rumble shook the room. The floor beneath the telescope shifted, revealing a spiral staircase descending into darkness. Watson drew his revolver, his soldier's instincts kicking in. "Holmes, what's this?" "A secret, Watson," Holmes replied, his voice alight with discovery. "And secrets, in my experience, are rarely benign." They descended, Thorn reluctantly leading the way. The staircase opened into an underground chamber, its walls carved with celestial motifs. At its center stood an altar, draped in saffron cloth and surrounded by candles. On the altar rested a leather-bound book, its cover embossed with a star. Holmes recognized the symbol from the manuscript, the mark of the Order of the Lost Star. "You're no mere antiquarian," Holmes said, his voice cutting through the silence. "You're a guardian of the cult's legacy." Thorn's eyes blazed. "You meddle in things you cannot comprehend, Holmes. The Star of Ether is our birthright, a key to truths beyond your rational mind. Truths that justify theft and betrayal," Holmes countered. "Your cult's ambitions led to the globe's theft, orchestrated by Lady Evelyn Crane." Thorn's laugh was bitter. "Lady Crane is a pawn, nothing more. The order is eternal. You cannot stop what is written in the stars." Before Holmes could respond, footsteps echoed from the staircase. 3 figures in saffron robes emerged, their faces masked, each wielding a curved dagger. Watson raised his revolver, but Holmes stayed his hand. "Not yet, Watson. Let's hear their terms." The leader, a woman whose voice carried a familiar cadence, stepped forward. "The Star of Ether belongs to us, Holmes. Surrender the key, and you may leave this place." Holmes' eyes narrowed. "Lady Crane, I presume." "Your lavender scent is unmistakable, despite the mask." The woman stiffened, then removed her mask, revealing the sharp features of Lady Evelyn Crane. "You're clever, Holmes, but outmatched. The Order has guarded this secret for centuries. You're a fleeting nuisance." "Fleeting, perhaps," Holmes said, "but persistent." "Watson, now." Watson fired a warning shot, the sound deafening in the stone chamber. The cultists hesitated, and Holmes seized the moment, grabbing the book from the altar and bolting for the staircase. Lady Crane shouted, and the cultists gave chase, their daggers glinting in the candlelight. The pursuit was chaotic, the narrow staircase a bottleneck of shoving and shouting. Holmes and Watson reached the observatory, slamming the trapdoor shut and barricading it with the telescope. They raced through the manor, the butler nowhere in sight, and burst onto the moor. The night air was sharp, the stars above us silent. Witness to their escape, they took shelter in a copse of trees, the book clutched in Holmes' hands. Watson, catching his breath, checked his revolver. "That was too close, Holmes. What's in that book?" Holmes opened it, revealing a map etched in silver ink, its lines tracing a path across the Yorkshire moors to a stone circle. "The final piece, Watson. This map leads to the Star of Ether. We're not done yet." The moor stretched before them, vast and unforgiving, its secrets buried under starlight. Holmes' mind raced, piecing together the cult's motives, the globe's purpose, and the crystal they had yet to find. The night was far from over, and the game was still afoot. The journey to the stone circle was arduous, the moor a labyrinth of bogs and bracken. Holmes navigated by the stars, his knowledge of astronomy as sharp as his deductive skills. Watson, ever loyal, kept pace, his revolver at the ready. The manuscript's words echoed in Holmes' mind, where the ancients gazed. The stone circle, he knew, was no mere monument. It was a celestial marker, aligned with the heavens in a way modern science had yet to fully grasp that as dawn broke. Casting a pale glow over the moor, they reached the circle. 7 monolithic stones stood in a ring, their surfaces etched with faint carvings of stars and comets. Holmes knelt, examining the ground. Here, Watson. A depression in the earth, recently disturbed. They dug, their hands clawing through damp soil until they struck a wooden chest. Inside was a crystal, star-shaped and radiant, pulsing with an inner light. Watson stared, awestruck. Is that the star of ether? Holmes nodded, his expression grave. The cult's prize. But its power remains a mystery. We must return to London, and a twig snapped behind them. Lady Crane and her cultists emerged from the mist, their daggers drawn. You found it, she said, her voice a mix of triumph and menace. But it ends here, Holmes. Holmes slipped the crystal into his pocket, his mind calculating. Watson, the map. Watson tossed the book to the ground, its pages fluttering open to the map. As the cultists lunged, Holmes kicked the book into a nearby bog, its pages sinking into the mire. Lady Crane screamed in fury, and the chase was on. Holmes and Watson ran, the moor a blur beneath their feet. The cultists were relentless, their saffron robes stark against the gray landscape. Holmes led them through a narrow ravine, using the terrain to his advantage. A fallen log became a tripping hazard, slowing their pursuers. Watson fired another shot, scattering the cultists, and they gained a precious lit dot at the edge of the moor. A village came into view. Holmes flagged down. A passing cart, and they clambered aboard, the driver whipping his horses into a gallop. The cultists faded into the distance, their shouts swallowed by the wind. Safe at last. Holmes examined the crystal under the cart's lantern. Its facets caught the light, casting patterns that mirrored the globe's constellations. This is no mere gem, Watson, he said. It's a key, a lens, a cipher. The globe and this crystal together unlock something greater. Watson, still gripping his revolver, shook his head. You've a knack for finding trouble, Holmes. What now? Now, Holmes said, a faint smile on his lips, we return to London. The celestial event approaches, and the order of the churn. Lost Star will not rest. We have the crystal, the map, and the truth. The game is far from over. The cart rumbled on, carrying them toward the horizon, where the stars awaited their final revelation. Chapter 8. The Moors at Midnight. The Yorkshire moors stretched endlessly before Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson. A vast expanse of heather and shadow under a sky pricked with stars. The air was crisp, carrying the earthy scent of peat and the faint tang of distant rain. The map they had secured from the secret observatory in the Yorkshire manor lay folded in Holmes' pocket, its cryptic markings memorized, a series of lines converging on a stone circle known as the Ring of Eld. Hidden deep in the moors, the duo moved silently, their boots sinking into the soft earth, guided only by the faint glow of a hooded lantern and the celestial patterns above. Holmes' sharp eyes scanned the horizon, his mind a whirl of calculations. The map, etched on vellum and stained with age, had revealed coordinates aligned with the constellation Orion, visible tonight in the clear autumn sky. The Star of Ether, the cult's mythical artifact, was said to be buried at this nexus, its location marked by the stones for centuries. Watson, ever the pragmatist, clutched his revolver, his breath visible in the chill air. "Holmes," he whispered, "are you certain this isn't another of Lady Crane's traps? That woman's cunning knows no bounds." Holmes' lips curved slightly, a rare flicker of amusement. "My dear Watson, Lady Crane's cunning is precisely why we're here. The map is genuine, its age and craftsmanship confirm it. But her hand in this affair is not yet done. Stay vigilant. The journey to the Ring of Eld was arduous. The moors were treacherous, with hidden bogs and sudden drops cloaked by heather. Holmes navigated with precision, using a pocket compass and the stars to correct their course. Watson, though accustomed to Holmes' uncanny sense of direction, marveled at his friend's ability to read the landscape as if it were a London street. The wind howled, carrying whispers of ancient secrets, and Watson's grip on his revolver tightened. After 2 hours of trudging, the silhouette of the stone circle emerged against the starry sky. The Ring of Eld was a jagged crown of monoliths, each stone weathered by time, their surfaces carved with faint runes that glowed faintly under the lantern's light. Holmes knelt, examining the ground at the circle's center. "Here," he said, pointing to a patch of earth where the heather was sparse. "The soil has been disturbed recently, within the last month. Someone has been here." Watson scanned the shadows, his soldier's instincts alert. "Cult members?" he asked. "Possibly," Holmes replied, his fingers tracing the runes on the nearest stone. "These symbols correspond to the manuscript's description of the lost star. They mark the burial site." He produced a small trowel from his coat and began to dig, the earth yielding easily under his precise movements. Watson stood guard, his eyes darting to every rustle in the heather. The trowel struck something solid, a wooden chest, its surface blackened with age. Holmes cleared the dirt, revealing a lock shaped like a star. "The key," he said, producing the star-shaped key from Lady Crane's locket, secured during the masked ball. With a click, the lock opened, and Holmes lifted the lid to reveal a crystal the size of a man's fist, its facets catching the starlight in a dazzling array of colors. "The star of a E-T-H-E-R," Watson exhaled, awestruck. "It's magnificent, Holmes, but what does it do?" Before Holmes could answer, a shadow moved in the periphery, a cloaked figure emerging from behind a monolith. Lady Evelyn Crane's voice cut through the night, sharp and commanding. "It grants knowledge beyond mortal comprehension, Mr. Holmes, and you've just handed it to me." She stepped into the lantern's glow, her face pale and regal, her eyes glinting with triumph. Behind her, 6 figures in saffron robes materialized, their faces obscured by hoods. Each held a blade, their movements synchronized like a pack of wolves. Watson raised his revolver, but Holmes' hand on his arm stayed him. "Not yet," Holmes murmured, his eyes locked on Lady Crane. "You've played your part admirably." Lady Crane continued, her voice smooth as silk. "The Order of the Saffron Veil thanks you for retrieving the star. Now, hand it over, and you may leave this moor alive." Holmes' expression was unreadable, his fingers still resting on the crystal. "You underestimate me, Lady Crane. The star's power is not yours to wield." The manuscript was clear. Its activation requires the celestial globe, which remains in London, far from your grasp. Her smile faltered, but only for a moment. "You think I haven't planned for this? The globe will be mine soon enough." My agents are already en route to the observatory. But the star is here, and I will have it now." Holmes stood, the crystal in hand, his posture relaxed yet coiled with intent. "Your agents will find the observatory well guarded," I ensured. "Inspector Lestrade stationed men there before we left. As for the star," he tossed it lightly, catching it with ease. "You'll have to take it from me." The cultists advanced, blades gleaming. Watson fired a warning shot into the air, the sound echoing across the moors. The cultists hesitated, but Lady Crane's voice snapped like a whip. "Seize them!" What followed was chaos. Holmes, with the agility of a fencer, dodged a cultist's lunge, using the man's momentum to send him crashing into a monolith. Watson fired again, wounding a second cultist in the leg, who collapsed with a cry. Holmes pocketed the crystal and drew his cane, its hidden blade flashing as he parried. Another attack. The moors became a battlefield, the starlight casting long shadows as the fight unfolded. Lady Crane, no mere spectator, drew a slender dagger from her cloak and moved with lethal grace. She aimed for Holmes, her blade slicing through the air. But he anticipated her strike, sidestepping and catching her wrist. "Your ambition blinds you," he said, twisting her arm until the dagger fell. She hissed, wrenching free and retreating behind her remaining men. Watson, meanwhile, grappled with a cultist, his military training evident as he disarmed his opponent with a swift blow to the wrist. The man fled into the darkness, leaving only 3 cultists standing. Holmes, now back to back with Watson, whispered, "The stones, Watson. Use them." Understanding dawned. Watson lured a cultist toward a monolith, then ducked, letting the man's momentum carry him into the stone, knocking him unconscious. Holmes dispatched another with a precise strike to the temple, leaving only 1 cultist and Lady Crane. The final cultist charged, but Holmes tripped him with his cane, sending him sprawling. Lady Crane, seeing her forces diminished, turned to flee, her cloak billowing as she vanished into the heather. Holmes gave chase, his long strides eating up the distance. Watson followed, revolver in hand, but the moor's uneven terrain slowed them. Holmes tracked her by the faint glint of her cloak's brooch, catching starlight. The chase led to a rocky outcrop where Lady Crane stood, panting, her back to a sheer drop. "You cannot stop the order," she spat. "The star's power will be ours with or without you." Holmes stepped closer, the crystal still in his pocket. "Your order is crumbling, Lady Crane. Your men are scattered, your plans exposed. Surrender, and the courts may show leniency." She laughed, a cold, bitter sound. "Leniency? I seek eternity, Holmes. The star will grant it." With a sudden movement, she lunged, not for Holmes, but for the edge of the outcrop, leaping into the darkness below. Holmes rushed forward, but she was gone, swallowed by the moor's shadows. Watson caught up, breathless. "Is she—" "Unlikely," Holmes said, peering into the abyss. "The drop is steep but not fatal. She's resourceful. We haven't seen the last of her." They returned to the stone circle where the chest lay open, its purpose fulfilled. The remaining cultists had fled or were unconscious, bound with Watson's belt for the authorities to collect. Holmes examined the crystal under the lantern's light, its facets refracting colors that seemed to pulse with an inner life. "This is no mere gem," he said. "Its structure suggests properties beyond our current science." We must return it to London and study it with the globe. The journey back was silent, the weight of the night's events heavy on both men. Watson, ever the chronicler, noted the details in his mind: the starlit moors, the clash of blades, Lady Crane's escape. Holmes, lost in thought, turned the crystal over in his pocket, his mind already piecing together the next steps dot by dot. They reached the manor, where a telegram from Lestrade confirmed the observatory's safety. The globe was secure, and the cult's agents had been apprehended. Holmes wired instructions to prepare the observatory for their return, emphasizing the need for secrecy. The Star of Ether, now in their possession, was a prize too dangerous for careless hands. As they boarded a train to London, Watson glanced at Holmes, who stared out the window, the crystal's faint glow visible through his coat. "What now, Holmes?" he asked. Holmes' eyes gleamed with determination. "Now, Watson, we unlock the celestial convergence. The globe and the star together hold the key to the cult's obsession. We have 2 days until the event. Let us ensure Lady Crane's plans are thwarted for good." The train rattled on, carrying them toward London and the next chapter of their adventure. The Star of Ether, safe for now, promised answers that would shake the foundations of their understanding, and Holmes was ready to face whatever truths it revealed. Chapter 9. The Celestial Convergence. The London fog clung to the streets like a conspirator, veiling the gaslights in a haze as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson made their way back to the city from the windswept Yorkshire moors. The star-shaped crystal, now safely tucked in Holmes' greatcoat pocket, seemed to hum with an unspoken promise, its facets catching the dim glow of passing lamps. The celestial globe, still missing, was the key to unlocking the crystal's purpose, and Holmes' mind churned with the implications of the manuscript's revelations. The cult of the lost star believed the globe and crystal together could pinpoint a celestial event tied to the mythical Star of Ether, an artifact said to grant cosmic knowledge. That event, Holmes had calculated, would occur in precisely 2 days, during a rare alignment of planets visible from the Royal Observatory in Greenwich. Watson, trudging beside him, adjusted his scarf against the chill. "Holmes, you're certain this convergence will reveal the globe's location? The cult's been devilishly clever so far. What if it's another trap?" Holmes' eyes gleamed with that peculiar intensity that surfaced when a case neared its climax. "The cult's cleverness is their undoing, Watson. Their obsession with this celestial event betrays their hand. The globe's engravings, matched with the crystal's refractive properties, will project a map of sorts, a map only, visible under the precise stellar conditions of the convergence. They cannot resist witnessing it, and that is where we shall find them." The hansom cab rattled to a stop at Baker Street, and the 2 men ascended to their familiar rooms. Mrs. Hudson, ever vigilant, had left a pot of tea steaming on the table, though it was well past midnight. Holmes ignored it, spreading the ancient manuscript from the British Museum vault across his desk. Its brittle pages, inscribed with cryptic astronomical symbols, had yielded their secrets under his relentless scrutiny. The cult believed the Star of Ether was no mere gem, but a conduit to divine insight, its coordinates hidden in the interplay of globe and crystal during the convergence. Holmes traced a line of text with his finger, muttering, "The stars align, the veil parts, and the truth of the cosmos speaks." Watson, settling into his armchair, frowned. "But what is this truth, Holmes? A philosophical notion, a treasure, or something more sinister?" Holmes lit his pipe, the smoke curling like a question mark. The cult's actions suggest they seek power, not enlightenment. Lady Crane, their leader, is no mystic, she's a strategist. The globe's return to the observatory will force her hand. She come for it, and will be ready. The plan was audacious, even for Holmes. He proposed a public demonstration at the Royal Observatory, ostensibly to showcase the recovered celestial globe, though it remained in the cult's possession. The announcement would be a lure, published in every major London paper, proclaiming the globe's restoration and inviting astronomers to witness the convergence through its lens. The cult, desperate to reclaim their prize, would infiltrate the event, and Holmes would be waiting by dawn. Holmes had dispatched telegrams to Inspector Lestrade at Scotland Yard, requesting a discreet but substantial police presence, and to Professor Hargrove, the observatory's curator, who agreed to host the demonstration despite his lingering anxiety over the globe's theft. Holmes then penned a notice for the Times, carefully worded to inflame the cult's urgency. The Royal Observatory proudly announces the return of the 17th century celestial globe, to be unveiled during the rare planetary alignment on July 24, 2025. Scholars and enthusiasts are invited to witness this historic event. Watson read the draft, his brow furrowing. You're dangling bait for a tiger, Holmes. If Lady Crane takes it, we'll have a fight on our hands. Holmes' lips twitched in a rare smile. A tiger, Watson, is predictable in its hunger. Let us prepare the cage. The next 48 hours were a blur of preparation. Holmes and Watson scoured the observatory, mapping every entrance, window, and potential hiding place. The trapdoor through which the thief had entered during the initial theft was sealed, its mechanism dismantled. Holmes inspected the display case where the globe had once rested, noting its reinforced glass and new lock installed at Hargrove's insistence. He also consulted with an optician, a wiry man named Mr. Penrose, who confirmed the crystal's ability to refract starlight into precise patterns when aligned with specific engravings. It's extraordinary, Penrose said, peering through his monocle. The crystal's cut suggests an understanding of optics centuries ahead of its time. Holmes nodded, his mind already elsewhere. The crystal, now hidden in a false compartment of his walking stick, was the key to the demonstration. Without the globe, he would use a replica, a convincing facsimile crafted by a glassblower in Whitechapel, to draw the cult into the open. The real challenge lay in anticipating Lady Crane's moves. Her cunning at the masked ball, where she had slipped through his grasp, lingered in Holmes' mind like a discordant note. The evening of July 24th arrived with a sky clear as polished glass, the stars pricking through the twilight like needles. The Royal Observatory buzzed with anticipation, its halls filled with astronomers, dignitaries, and curious onlookers. Lestrade's men, disguised as ushers, mingled with the crowd, their eyes sharp for any sign of trouble. Watson, stationed near the main entrance, clutched his revolver beneath his coat, his nerves taut as a bowstring. Holmes, dressed in his usual austere black, stood by the replica globe, its brass and gem-encrusted surface gleaming under the chandeliers. Professor Hargrove, pale but composed, delivered a brief speech, extolling the globe's historical significance and the marvel of the impending convergence. As the clock struck 9, the observatory's dome opened, revealing the night sky. Telescopes were trained on the alignment of Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars, a rare trifecta that would peak at precisely 10:17 p.m. Holmes, feigning nonchalance, adjusted the replica globe, his fingers brushing the crystal hidden in his sleeve. The crowd murmured. Their attention split between the sky and the gleaming artifact. Watson scanned the faces, searching for the telltale poise of Lady Crane or her cloaked acolytes. A faint rustle caught Holmes' ear, barely audible over the hum of conversation. He tilted his head, his senses sharpening. The sound came from the gallery above, where shadows clung to the rafters. Without turning, he signaled Watson with a subtle flick of his wrist. Watson nodded, slipping toward the staircase, his hand tightening on his weapon. The gallery was dim, its corners shrouded in darkness. Watson moved cautiously, his footsteps muffled on the carpeted floor. A figure darted between two columns, their cloak blending with the shadows. Watson gave chase, his heart pounding, but the figure vanished into a side passage. He cursed it under his breath, doubling back to alert Holmes. Below, Holmes maintained his vigil by the replica globe, his eyes scanning the crowd. A woman in an emerald-green gown caught his attention, her posture too deliberate, her gaze too fixed on the artifact. She wore a half-mask, a remnant of the Mayfair ball's fashion, but her height and the graceful tilt of her head betrayed her. Lady Evelyn Crane. Holmes stepped forward, his voice low but commanding. Lady Crane, your presence is as predictable as the stars. The woman froze, then turned, her mask glinting in the light. Mr. Holmes, she purred, her voice smooth as velvet. You've gone to great lengths for a mere trinket. A trinket that holds the key to your cult's obsession, Holmes replied. The star of ether, or so you believe. Shall we test its power? He raised the crystal, its facets catching the starlight streaming through the dome. A murmur rippled through the crowd as beams of light danced across the replica globe, forming a faint pattern of lines and nodes. The astronomers gasped, unaware of the deception, but Lady Crane's eyes narrowed. A clever forgery, she said, but where is the true globe? Safe, Holmes said, stepping closer. And you'll lead me to it. Before she could respond, a commotion erupted at the room's edge. Watson burst through the crowd, his face flushed. Holmes. A man in the gallery carrying a device. Holmes' gaze snapped upward. A cloaked figure stood at the gallery's railing, a metallic object glinting in his hands. The crowd's murmurs turned to screams as the man raised the device, a crude bomb, its fuse already lit. Lestrade's men surged forward, but the distance was too great. Watson, acting on instinct, drew his revolver and fired. The shot struck the man's hand, sending the bomb clattering to the floor. It fizzled, its fuse extinguished by the impact. The crowd erupted in panic, but Lestrade's men moved swiftly, restraining the would-be bomber and clearing the room. Lady Crane seized the moment, slipping toward a side exit, but Holmes was faster. He blocked her path, the crystal still in his hand. You're out of moves, Lady Crane, he said, his voice cold as steel. She laughed, a brittle sound. You think this ends with me? The cult is larger than you know. The star of ether will rise. Holmes gestured to Lestrade, who approached with handcuffs. Your cult is dismantled, its members scattered. The globe is no longer yours to wield. As Lady Crane was led away, Watson joined Holmes, his breath still heavy from the chase. That was too close, Holmes. If that bomb had gone off, it didn't, Holmes said, his tone final. But the globe remains at large. But I will find it, and we will have our answers before the convergence ends." The observatory was evacuated, leaving Holmes, Watson, and a handful of Lestrade's men. The night sky still burned bright, the planetary alignment nearing its peak. Holmes returned to the replica globe, his mind racing. The manuscript had hinted at a secondary function of the crystal, a failsafe, perhaps, designed by the globe's creator to reveal its location if separated from its key. He inserted the crystal into a hidden slot in the replica, a feature he'd noticed during his earlier inspection. The mechanism clicked, and a faint glow emanated from the globe's base. A projection flickered to life on the observatory's dome, a map of London overlaid with celestial coordinates. A single point pulsed in the east end, near the perfumery, where they'd first encountered Madame Elise. Holmes' eyes narrowed. The lavender trail returns. With Lestrade's men in tow, Holmes and Watson raced through the fog-choked streets to the perfumery. The shop was dark, its windows shuttered, but a faint light glowed from the basement. Holmes picked the lock with practiced ease, and they descended into a cavernous space lined with shelves of vials and alchemical tools. In the center stood the celestial globe, its gems winking in the candlelight. A lone figure, Madame Elise, stood beside it, her face pale. "I didn't want this," she whispered. "They forced me to hide it." Holmes approached, his expression unyielding. "The cult is finished, Madame. Hand over the globe." She hesitated, then stepped aside. Holmes lifted the globe, its weight familiar from his earlier examinations. He inserted the crystal, and the room filled with a dazzling projection of stars, their patterns aligning perfectly with the convergence overhead. The cult's dream of cosmic power was a mirage, but the globe's beauty was undeniable, a testament to human ingenuity, not divine secrets. By midnight, the globe was back at the observatory, secured in its case. Lestrade's men had rounded up the remaining cultists, their network shattered. Watson, nursing a brandy, watched Holmes as he gazed at the stars through the open dome. "What now, Holmes?" he asked. "The case is solved, but I can't shake the feeling there's more. To this star of ether." Holmes exhaled, a rare moment of introspection. "The stars hold no secrets, Watson, only truths we've yet to understand. The cult sought power, but the globe's true purpose was to remind us of our place in the cosmos, small yet endlessly curious." They stood in silence, the weight of the night settling around them. The convergence had passed, its light fading, but the mystery of the celestial globe had been laid bare, its secrets no longer a threat but a marvel. Chapter 10. The Star's Final Secret. The air in London was crisp with the promise of autumn, the city's pulse thrumming under a sky that seemed to hold its breath for the celestial event just 2 days away. Sherlock Holmes sat in his armchair at 221 B. Baker Street, the celestial globe resting on the table before him, its polished brass surface catching the flicker of the firelight. The star-shaped crystal, retrieved from the Yorkshire moors, lay beside it, its facets refracting the glow into a kaleidoscope of soft colors. Dr. John Watson, seated opposite, sipped his tea, his brow furrowed as he watched Holmes, who had been silent for nearly an hour, his sharp eyes fixed on the globe as if it might whisper its secrets. "Holmes," Watson ventured at last, setting his cup down, "you've been staring at that thing as if it's about to confess. Have you worked out how the crystal and globe fit together?" Holmes leaned forward, his fingers steepled. The globe and the crystal are a mechanism, Watson a key and lock to a puzzle older than the stones of London itself. The manuscript from the British Museum vault was clear. When aligned during the celestial convergence, they reveal the star of ether's secret. But I suspect the answer is not a treasure in the common sense. The cult's obsession, Lady Crane's desperation, it points to something more profound. Watson nodded, though his expression betrayed his skepticism. A philosophical truth. You said, but how do we test it? The symposium at the Royal Observatory is tomorrow night, and the cult's remnants are still out there. You're planning something, aren't you? Holmes' lips curved into a faint smile. Indeed, Watson. The observatory will be the stage, and the convergence the curtains rise. We shall lure the remaining cultists into the open, recover the globe's full purpose, and end this affair. But first, we must prepare. The following day, Holmes and Watson arrived at the Royal Observatory in Greenwich, where the air buzzed with anticipation. Astronomers from across Europe milled about, their conversations a hum of excitement over the rare alignment of stars expected that night. Professor Hargrove, the curator, greeted them with a nervous smile, his eyes darting to the empty display case where the globe had once stood. Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, Hargrove said, wringing his hands, I trust you've brought the globe? The symposium's attendees are eager to see it, and I've heard whispers of unsavory types lurking about. Holmes patted the leather case at his side, where the globe and crystal were safely stored. Fear not, Professor. The globe will be revealed at the precise moment. Have your staff prepared the telescope dome as I instructed? Hargrove nodded. Yes, the dome is open, and the platform is set for your demonstration. But are you certain about this public display? If the thieves, they will come, Holmes interrupted, his voice low, and we shall be ready. As evening fell, the observatory's great hall filled with scholars, dignitaries, and curious onlookers. The celestial globe, now restored to its case, gleamed under the soft glow of gas lamps, its gem-encrusted constellations sparkling like stars brought to earth. Holmes stood beside it, his presence commanding, while Watson, ever vigilant, scanned the crowd for signs of trouble. The air grew thick with anticipation as the clock neared midnight, the hour of the convergence. Holmes stepped forward, raising a hand for silence. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice carrying across the hall. Tonight, we witness not only a rare celestial event, but the unveiling of a mystery encoded in this remarkable globe. Forged in the 17th century, it is more than an artifact. It is a key to a truth long forgotten. He lifted the star-shaped crystal, its edges catching the light, and inserted it into a nearly invisible slot at the globe's base. A soft click echoed, and the crowd gasped as the globe began to hum, its internal mechanism stirring. Holmes turned the globe, aligning its constellations with the night sky visible through the open dome above. A beam of light shot from the crystal, projecting a shimmering pattern onto the dome's curved surface, a constellation unknown to modern astronomy, its stars forming a spiral that seemed to pulse with life. The crowd murmured, some in awe, others in confusion. Watson, standing near the entrance, noticed a group of cloaked figures slipping into the hall, their movements furtive. He nudged Holmes, who gave a subtle nod, his eyes never leaving the projection. This, Holmes continued, is the lost constellation of ether, revered by an ancient cult who believed it held the key to cosmic knowledge. But what is this knowledge? Not gold, not power, but a revelation about our place in the universe. Before he could elaborate, a shout rang out. One of the cloaked figures lunged toward the globe, a blade glinting in his hand. Watson sprang forward, tackling the man to the ground, but two others emerged, one clutching a small, ominous device, a bomb, its fuse already lit. The crowd screamed, scattering as Holmes moved with lightning speed, seizing the device and hurling it through an open window into the observatory's courtyard, where it exploded harmlessly in a burst of sparks. "Stay calm," Holmes shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. He and Watson subdued the remaining cultists, their movements practiced and precise. Within moments, the observatory's security, alerted by Holmes' prior instructions, had the intruders in custody. As the crowd settled, Holmes returned to the globe, undeterred. "The cult sought to suppress this truth," he said, gesturing to the projection. "But let us see it through." He adjusted the crystal, and the constellation's spiral tightened, forming a series of glyphs that shimmered briefly before fading. Holmes' eyes gleamed with understanding. "It is not a map to treasure," he said softly, almost to himself. "It is a message." The demonstration concluded, and the crowd dispersed, buzzing with speculation. Holmes and Watson remained with Hargrove, who was pale but relieved. "What does it mean, Mr. Holmes?" he asked, staring at the now silent globe. Holmes turned to the curator, his expression contemplative. "The glyphs speak of harmony, humankind's role, not as conquerors of the cosmos, but as its stewards. The star of ether is no artifact. It is the idea that our pursuit of knowledge must be tempered with humility. The cult and Lady Crane sought to twist this into a tool for dominance." Watson frowned. "So all this, the theft, the cult, the chases, was for a philosophy?" Holmes chuckled. "Is that not the most human of motives, Watson? To chase meaning even at great cost?" The next morning, Holmes and Watson visited Newgate Prison, where Lady Evelyn Crane awaited trial. She sat in her cell, her once regal demeanor subdued but defiant. "You think you've won, Mr. Holmes," she said, her voice cold. "But the star's power could have reshaped the world." Holmes regarded her coolly. "Your vision of power was a delusion, Lady Crane. The globe's truth is not for one to wield, but for all to ponder. Your cult is finished, and the globe is safe." She turned away, silent, and Holmes knew she would carry her obsession to the end. As they left the prison, Watson glanced at his friend. "Do you think she ever understand?" Holmes shook his head. "Some minds cling to shadows, Watson. But we have done our part." That evening, they returned to the observatory, where the globe was once again secured in its case, its gems winking under the starlight streaming through the dome. Hargrove joined them, his gratitude evident. The symposium was a success. "Despite the chaos," he said, "the globe will remain here, a reminder of tonight's lesson." Holmes and Watson stepped outside, the night sky sprawling above them, vast and indifferent. The stars seemed brighter, as if acknowledging the truth uncovered. "What now, Holmes?" Watson asked, pulling his coat tighter against the chill. Holmes lit his pipe, the smoke curling upward like a question. "Now, Watson, we return to Baker Street. The universe has its mysteries, but London has its share as well. I suspect we won't wait long for the next." They walked into the night, their silhouettes blending with the shadows, the stars above bearing witness to their quiet triumph. The celestial globe, safe in its place, held its secret no longer, a testament to the enduring quest for truth, not power. In the vastness of the cosmos, the days that followed were quieter, though London never truly slept. Holmes immersed himself in his chemical experiments, while Watson penned his account of the case, his pen scratching late into the night. The celestial convergence had passed, but its echo lingered in their thoughts. The globe's message, so simple yet so profound, seemed to resonate beyond the observatory's walls, a reminder that even the greatest mysteries often led not to riches, but to reflection. In the weeks that followed, whispers of the case spread through London's intellectual circles. Scholars debated the lost constellation, while newspapers spun tales of Holmes' daring at the observatory. Watson, ever the chronicler, ensured the truth was preserved, though he softened the edges of Lady Crane's downfall. Sensing her story was one of tragedy as much as Holmes, for his part, seemed content to let the matter fade. He played his violin on quiet evenings, the notes drifting through Baker Street like stars in a private sky. Yet Watson knew his friend's mind was never idle. The celestial globe had been a puzzle, but it was merely one among many. Somewhere, in the city's labyrinth or beyond, another mystery waited.